Hey guys! This is part 9 of What If Naruto Went Back in Time but Ended Up in the Wrong Timeline. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start! Chapter 82. The day was beautiful. It was a strange observation to make here, now. But it still reached him. Through the pain, the taste of blood, the smell of smoke, and the touch of metal, it reached him. The glimmering rays of warm sunlight breaking through the canopy, the sound of a small stream a short ways over the hill. The rustling of leaves and the creaking of branches in the gently whistling wind. If people were quiet enough, they could have heard it. If they weren't screaming, fighting, dying. This war had always felt like a waste. That seemed just a bit more clear now. He took a deep breath. Feeling the ache across his chest, sharp and stinging. Naruto heard the snapping of dry underbrush near him. And just like that, he pushed those thoughts aside, remembering instead Inchan's words and voice. Don't be stupid. His eyes shifted, from blue back to the eyes of a toad, the red markings spreading over his face as Ma and Pa took up their places on his shoulders. He spread out his senses. The Chunin force was doubling back now, surrounding him. Hoping to help, or at the very least prevent his escape. Little candles floating around the blazing torches that were the S-class shinobi that hard helped wear him down already. Not a threat. Not on their own. But there were many. So many. I made Inchan a promise. Chakra coruscated along his skin, flows and eddies of power pouring off his body, sinking into the earth. They sensed him. As one, he felt them turn, converge, sharks turning to the blood-drenched bait. The trees parted at his command, boughs and green-covered limbs parting to spears of sunlight before he rushed headlong to meet them. The first Chunin barely had time to gasp. The wind-empowered blade sliced his head open, dark blood bursting from the clean gash. The next man saw him, raising his weapon, fear glinting in his eyes. But not much more than that before the knife was through his throat. 3 more follow, 3 more die. Then more and more. They're too slow, too weak, they can't see, or they have no instincts. Too young, too old, too frail. He kills them. One by one. They die in a pointless, wasted effort. Blood washes the forest floor, painting the tree bark, the leaves, the soil. He hates this. And it's a struggle to keep killing them. To keep his focus through the screams and the fear he can see behind the shadow of their eyes. When they rush him, stupidly, desperately, he makes nature come alive around him. Earth crushes men under stone and dirt, water bashes their bodies, breaking them as he tosses the corpses aside, wind carves them open and the wood of the trees bends and shapes around him to shield him from their attacks. Then, Han is there. The red-armored Jinchuriki comes bursting out of the forest, a path of ruin in his wake, steam bellows from his backpack, his eyes glowing white and smoky. Sage-powered strength meets him again, blow for blow, but he's fighting differently now, more reserved, cautious. A distraction? The Mokuton user's senses spread out, an influx of sensory information nearly overwhelming him before he notices the danger. He leaps up, into the sky as dozens of blades burst from the ground in a nearly perfect snare. A swarm of puppets chasing after him as they claw out of dirt, and rocks skittering up the trees to follow and attack him. The trees twist and bend, their massive limbs crushing the puppets or speaking them in place. He hears metal tear, gears grinding together, glass and wires shattering and tearing. More come pouring out of the forest, like insects, crawling over their dead to get to him. His hands clap together, hand seals forming in rapid succession before a gale of wind tears apart the forest around him, forcing the puppets to hunker down or be swept up in the miniature tornado, their bodies breaking as he slams them into tree trunks and boulders. There's a rustle of leaves above him, bypassing the winds, straight into the eye, and the Konoha ninja turns, hand lashing out and catching Fukuro's sword in his hand. The blade was sharp, sharp enough to cut deep into his palm, even with Sage Mode making him all but physically invulnerable. If the man would have been a wind user, he'd have lost his hand. The sage twisted, looking to shatter the blade, but with an utter lack of hesitation, Fukuro released the sword entirely, making the attempted break impossible with one hand. With his freed hands, the old assassin pulled free a stack of explosive notes, all but shoving them in Naruto's direction. The chakra moved instinctively, forming a clone beside him, ready to yank him away, when, just as soon as it appeared, it was gone, banished by a screeching wail, razor-sharp talons and the flapping of wings as Fukuro was pulled away by that same owl's summon. Naruto did the only thing he could. He crossed his arms and braced. Then the tags exploded. Heat and force hit the blonde like a concrete wall, slamming into him. His grip slipped from Fukuro's sword, raw power knocking him out of the sky, sending him spiraling down end over end, the world becoming a blur of colors and disorientation. He hit something, a tree, though it breaking underneath him before he hit the ground, his body tearing the earth apart. He coughed, tasting metal. "You have to move, boy." Pa's voice brings his mind back to the battle, forces him to focus. But it's almost too late. A swarm of Deidara's bombs in the shape of birds and insects swoops down between the trees. Naruto's almost too slow, his chakra nearly too sluggish. Earth and wood twist and bend and warp around him, shielding him in a cocoon of stone and armor that's hammered and blasted into with enough force to break a mountain. Wood splinters, earth cracks and crumbles. The force knocks the wind out of him. 1,000 hammers pounding and pounding and pounding. He feels something break. The sound is so loud he can't even hear himself scream as the heat and the flames burn at his flesh. He's not sure how long the barrage lasts. He's barely even aware of when it ends. Boy, can you hear me? Pa, he's bleeding. I don't think he's okay." Their voices, again, give him something to focus on, a distraction from the pain. Naruto breathes and chokes on the taste of smoke, and the dryness of his throat. He feels the soothing touch of healing chakra easing some of the aches in his body. The toads are not slugs. Healing is not their strong suit, but it helps, even if only enough to help him think clearly again. "I'm alright." It's a lie. A bad one. But it's all he can offer. He reaches up, to the remains of the stone armor and wood shield that had cocooned him, saved him, and finishes breaking it apart as he forces himself to his feet. He sways, the last bits of crumbling rock and wood break apart over his body, dust and smoke billowing around him. His left eye is stinging with the blood trailing down from his skull, and he can feel the oozing stickiness clinging to his clothes. The wolves surround him now, closing in as though they can smell the wounds. He tried to breathe and felt a sharp, jagged pain across his chest. Was something broken? Probably, but… He whirled where he stood, catching a thrown kunai by the ring, twirling it around his finger before flinging it back, the wind blade shrouding it as it punched through a thick tree trunk to lodge itself in the back of the chunin that had thrown it. "I'm not done yet." When Hinata's fist came up, in a split second the rest of them came to a cold, dead stop along the trees. Sasuke didn't speak, merely gesturing with his hands, knowing Hinata would see it with her active Byakugan. "What do you see?" The Hyuga heiress turned her head, making a sharp move, indicating they should follow before darting off with barely a rustle of leaves left in her wake. Sasuke followed her, and he heard more than saw Sakura and Lee follow him. Hinata moved fast, almost too fast, her Byakugan giving her plenty of time to plan her movement in advance. She'd almost be too fast to keep up with, if not for his own ability to follow directly behind her, using her as a guide. When they came upon the men, Sasuke felt himself go still, stiffening in surprise. Konoha shinobi. A throng of them, fleeing, stumbling, bleeding. They'd fought. They'd fought recently, and they'd lost. Hinata didn't spare them a glance. She was a woman with an objective, and after a split second to get over his shock, Sasuke followed. Finally, reaching whatever she was looking for, Hinata's hand snaked out, grasping someone, arresting their movement. It was Tenten. He hadn't recognized her, covered in dirt, blood, and lacking her typical hair buns, but it was her. "Hinata!" Her eyes swam, finding his. "Sasuke? We're here." Lee spoke up, marching past him and towards his teammate. Tenten looked at him as though she couldn't believe he was flesh and blood rather than a mirage. She stumbled forward, and Lee had to all but catch her as the strength in her legs seemed to abandon her. Sasuke moved, his hand glowing with the light of a diagnostic scan. "Lay her down. I can help." "Where's Naruto?" Sakura's question was sharp, almost demanding. But no one rebuked her for the near rudeness, not even Tenten. "Fighting," the Chunin commander answered, grunting. "We were cut off." Sasuke's eyes turned to Kyofu, who carried on the back of her lizard summon Ryoko, the white-haired girl looking pale and gaunt as she wheezed her breaths. Her eyes swimming in her skull, likely slipping in and out of consciousness. "He's fighting. North of here. Multiple S-class shinobi." It was Hinata that took charge, snapping her fingers with a sound so loud it was like a firecracker, bringing all eyes to her as she gestured in sign language. "How many?" 5 at least, Kyofa answered. If more came, we can't be sure. There's also a force of Chunin, 50, maybe more. All fresh and ready to fight. Sasuke's frown deepened. He couldn't win against that. Hinata's hands moved. Her orders clear, decisive, and with no hesitation. Can you still fight? I can. Kyofa nodded. Sasuke! The Uchiha heir's attention was focused on the Hyuga, her milky white eyes staring into his own as he followed the movement of her sign language. Fix Tenten. Fix Ryoko, organize whatever force you can hear. Then bring them. Catch up. Splitting up was a horrible choice, but then again, it was the only choice. He nodded. Sakura Lee Kyofu with me. We move. Now! There was no word of protest, no second guessing. Each of the three obeyed without a second's hesitation. Only a fleeting look passed between him and Sakura, his pink-haired teammate offering a nod that was half reassurance, half promise. The waters churned and rippled, 1,000 little pools and puddles tinkling all around her as Konan stepped forward, her footsteps as soft as a raindrop on the crystalline surface. Orochimaru circled the blue-haired Kunoichi, Tsunade on the opposite flank. The AIM woman marched forward, with not an ounce of fear or even concern that he could detect on her face or body language. She felt in control, despite the fact that it was the two of them she was facing. Orochimaru was not so foolish as to think it was without reason. She drew her blade, the short sword glinting almost silver in the rain. He shifted his weight and saw Tsunade respond, picking up on the tell. The medic struck first. Tsunade was slower than he was even at the best of times, but she didn't need speed. Konan turned, facing the woman before Tsunade drew up her foot, stomping down on the ground, rock split apart, cracking open and spearing upwards like teeth. Konan stumbled, her balance thrown off, and Orochimaru seized the opportunity, striking as fast as the snake he was so likened to. The Kusanagi blade flashed, cutting through the air, through droplets of rain to seek out Konan's naked throat. Then she vanished. There was no puff of smoke, no blur of speed. 1 second the woman was there, in the next she was gone with only the barest hint of chakra usage in the air to hearken her disappearance. He was surprised, but not so much so that he would fail to block the strike that came from above and behind him, the woman descending with a swing of her tanto. Steel rang clear in his ears as the weapons struck one another, and Tsunade took the opportunity to leap with a blindingly fast kick that should have caught the AIM Kunoichi full in the ribs, shattering everything and ending the fight right then and there. Only for the woman to vanish again. This time, she reappeared between the both of them, kunai in one hand, tanto in the other, the knife moving to be thrown into Tsunade's back and the tanto already mid-swing to slice his stomach open. He leapt back, the short blade barely missing him as his tongue shot out of his mouth, wrapping around her wrist, holding the kunai to yank the limb off course, the kunai now useless and out of position. Tsunade came straight down, twisting in a nearly fluid motion to crack her leg onto Konan's exposed shoulder blade in her signature drop kick. Orochimaru tightened the hold his tongue had over the kunoichi's wrist, intent on not allowing her to disappear once again. His efforts were for nothing, the woman there one moment and simply gone the next, pulling free of his grip with impossible force. Not teleportation then, something else. Strong. A form of chakra manipulation? It couldn't be speed. Even if she'd had the strength to break free, she'd have been slowed, at least marginally. What was this? Tsunade's heel crashed down onto the ground, pools of rainwater rippling and leaping from the ground in the tremendous crash that followed. The ground of the reservoir splitting apart, the snake Sanon's eyes panned across the area, searching, finding the target impossibly far away, reaching her feet as she stared them down. It's not speed, Tsunade commented as she straightened, wiping at her knees before cracking her knuckles. No, it's not, he agreed. Some technique, one she can afford to use freely, so not chakra intensive. Very precise. Any ideas? The rain poured down harder from the skies above, hissing through the cracks and openings in the overhead cave ceiling. He didn't have a ready answer for her. He was killing them. One by one, piece by piece, Naruto was tearing through the encircling force of Iwa Nin. A slew of corpses now littering the forest floor beneath her. Kuratsuchi could see the moment the strategy changed. The moment her team decided to let sheer weight of numbers win the fight. Fukuro was a mercenary. He wanted to spend the money he was paid, not die for it. Sasori had already lost over a third of his 100 puppets, and was in no hurry to lose more, or risk his own life. The destruction of his primary puppet body had shaken him. Deidara was nearly dead on his feet as it was, chakra exhaustion and blood loss sapping much of his strength. It seemed more spite than anything else was keeping the man conscious. Even Han, the most bloodthirsty, the one that hated Naruto the most, was content to let the others die in his place. They were afraid. A part of her wanted to order them to attack. To stop the mindless, needless slaughter of the IWA Chunin and Jounin when this wasn't their fight. This wasn't the fight they were supposed to step into, or one they could win without a steep price. Naruto would slaughter, had already slaughtered so many of them. But the other part of her realized if she did, while Naruto might kill some of them too, it would just expedite his death if she gave that order. Every swing, every kill, every dodge and fresh wound made the blonde move a little slower, just that bit more sluggish than the last time. They were dying. But they were killing him too. She stood there, in the trees, hiding, watching, and struggled to find what to do. How she could end this, fix this. Then, just like that, the decision was taken out of her hands. She felt the instant the opening appeared when that strange, powerful chakra coursing through him flickered for an instant as his body failed him. That's when they, all of them, struck. Sasori's puppets, Fukuro's speed, Han's brutality. Only she and Deidara didn't act. The puppets grabbed him, held him down, the chakra returned and 2 more of them were destroyed, but it was enough. With a cry, Fukuro's sword cut through flesh, narrowly missing the blonde's heart as he swerved at the last moment. Instead, the blade found and bit into the flesh at the juncture of his collarbone and shoulder joint, running him through the steel, holding him in place as Fukuro dug in his heels, chakra rooting him to the ground as the blonde grit his blood-stained teeth. Han was the last. The red-armored Jinchuriki came in with speed and raw power, his armored fist cocked back and chambered for a thunderous blow. Chakra swirled in Naruto's palm, a condensed ball of pure energy in the infamous Rasengan technique, as his last remaining arm lashed out, catching Han's fist with a shriek of shearing metal and a squeal of steam-powered armor. Chakra crackled and leapt like lightning, pure power tearing apart Han's prosthetic arm, tearing the metal to pieces before the human weapon's flesh and blood arm pressed the attack, striking with a right hook that caught the blonde full in the face, cracking his jaw and whipping his head back. She saw him go slack, his body all but giving up the fight and held in place only by Fukuro's sword. And like a lightning bolt leaping into his back, his body jerked back into motion. The roots of the trees spearing out of the dirt to gore Han through the soles of his boots, into his shins and thighs. Fukuro ripped his sword out of the blonde's shoulder, tearing it up and out of his collarbone. Han's lower body shifted, becoming wisps of steam, letting him slip free of the blood-soaked roots before once again punching the sage with all the strength he could, with blows that could match or surpass Senju Tsunade in strength. The Storm King fell, the thunderous strike tearing his body through trees and rocks along the forest floor. When he finally settled, the 2 toads that had been on his shoulders were gone. He did not get back up. Slowly, cautiously she saw them approach, encircling the body, Chunin and S-Class Nin inching their way closer, as though afraid of some trap. Finally, Fukuro was the one to break the silence. Tough bastard, wasn't he? The mercenary from Takigakure stepped closer, leaning down over the body. The blood-drenched blade dripped with red. Kuratsuchi marched out, descending from the canopy above before negotiating her way through the field of corpses and weary, wounded soldiers. Approaching Han and Fukuro, the closest of the teammates, as her mind spun, trying to think of the IWA Jinchuriki move, then, stepping closer, and she could almost feel the man's intent. Stop! She blurted out the words before her brain could catch up, and it was all she could do to keep the naked panic from her face. The human weapon turned, eyeing her with a low, smoldering rage behind his steel-gray eyes. What? I didn't stutter. Anger replaced the panic, false bravado serving as a shield, a sword and a mask all at once before she turned her eyes to the unconscious, bleeding Naruto. We take him alive. No. Han snarled, rounding on her. We kill him now. Last I checked, that's what we're here for. Her mind sped, wondering how she could convince him. Then she remembered, she didn't need to convince him. He's a greater prize alive than dead, she said, shifting her weight as she rested one hand over her hip, trying to portray more confidence than she felt. The Mokuton, for the first time in generations. After the Sandame's raid on our village, how many secrets did they steal? How many techniques did they take? Not only does he have the Mokuton but 3 chakra affinities as well. He could be the secret to creating a whole new bloodline within Iwagakure. You may not like it since it can suppress your power as a Jinchuriki, but the rest of us. She let the implication hang, and she could almost feel Fukuro and Sasori's greed warping their minds for her. She just needed enough. Enough doubt, enough greed, enough potential power leveled against Han, and she could force his compliance. Her eyes trailed down to the battered and beaten Naruto. He could escape later, he just had to survive. Just for a bit. Just long enough. We kill him. This isn't a democracy. She snapped. I am your commanding officer. You follow my orders. We take him alive, Jinchuriki. Han's eyes flashed with something, and she could feel the tingle of naked killing intent leveled her way, but she did not flinch. He could get in line like the rest of the fucking world. Her hand reached for the sword of the daimyo resting at her back. Her warning clear. Han was powerful, Han was a Jinchuriki. But he was battered, tired, injured. Blood oozed from his leg, the stump of his prosthetic limb clicked and whirred in intermittent jams. He was a beast. But a wounded one. She wasn't. She'd take those odds. Try it, she snarled. I agree with the dog. Daidara's voice cut her down to the bone, a sharp slice of dread across her chest as she brought her eyes up where the pallid, ashen Nuknin stared down at the body like he'd sooner light it on fire than see him taken alive. The man clutched at the stump of his arm, the blood still oozing from the wound, and not for the first time did she regret saving him. Get it the fuck over with. Safer if he's dead. You might be scared. But I'm willing to bet that such a kid of yours will throw in a pretty bonus at having him alive. Fukuro's calm, dry voice carried a hint of laughter, and the old man seemed to be practically salivating at the thought of any further riches or boons that could come his way for this. Her eyes trailed to Sasori, the deciding vote on this. If he sided with her idea, she could force the other two. If he didn't, well, suddenly, there was a shout somewhere behind them, screaming cutting through the trees, chaos breaking across the ranks of men surrounding them, and Kuratsuchi turned her eyes away from Han and the other members of her team, just in time to see a white blur slice its way across a half-dozen men before rushing straight towards her. Her arm snapped, drawing the blade of the daimyo before the sound of steel striking steel was heard, a short ninjato blade grinding against her own weapon as the milky white eyes of a Hyuga woman flashed like diamonds in the gleam of the light. Konoha Senpu. The white was matched by green, and the blow that cracked across her sternum was too fast for her eyes to see, pure force making the air explode from her lungs as she was sent flying, smashing into a large boulder, her back cracking against the granite as she hit the ground on her hands and knees. From there, the forest became chaos. The Hyuga with her Byakugan had navigated a path through the encirclement, until she could strike directly in the center of the formation. Men were confused, panicked. Spiders and lizard summons she recognized as the beasts from Naruto's teammate Kyofu exploded from the forest and the ground beneath their feet, right in the middle of the loose formation. Men screamed, and like that, pandemonium and fear spread like wildfire. Kuratsuchi stumbled to her feet and took in the scene as Han battled against a green-clad jounin whose skin pulsed, angry and red with only the white of his eyes visible as the Hyuga woman moved through Sasori's puppets and the onslaught of Chunin like a river navigating through rocks, rushing towards the downed Naruto. She was a threat, an obvious one. Men moved to intercept, not noticing the shadow with pink hair that reached Konoha's Storm King first. She did. But so did Fukuro. The old man's blade lashed out, like quicksilver, its razor-sharp edge nearly taking the girl's head off before she dodged. Kuratsuchi saw him smile, reaching down and grabbing his prisoner. Sorry, dear. This one's mine. Kuratsuchi's heart dropped. The old man vanished in a swirl of leaves. She stumbled to her feet, gritting her teeth before turning away and pursuing the old man's faint chakra signature, not caring whether or not anyone noticed or whether they chose to stay to fight or follow after her. By the time the bulk of the battle group that had left Amigekyu realized the danger, it was already too late. Barely a third of them were left, and nearly all of them were under the thrall of her genjutsu, having looked into her eyes without ever noticing the spinning red of the Sharingan, disguised under the henge of already slain men or small, insignificant animals, ravens, swallows, and bobcats. They tried to flee, return to the safety of Amigekyu. She didn't let them. Word couldn't get back after all. Instead, those under her thrall she redirected deeper into the forest, deeper into Konoha territory. Those not under her control she picked off, one by one as they fled and scattered, her raven thralls keeping eyes on them as she directed them into bogs, poisonous plants, or simply used the more direct method of the knife and her own two hands. The border patrols did the rest. The remains of the disorganized, disoriented battle group were all killed with nary a scream. The Chunin patrols were quick to seize the advantage, slaying them all quickly, quietly. Clean deaths. And then, as quietly as the bodies were made, so too were they disposed. Destroyed or taken for study. It did not matter. The only one that arrived, alive and fit to be questioned, was the commander. The leader. The one with information. As she dropped the illusion over his mind and body, he looked upon her eyes directly for the first time, surrounded by over a dozen men. He screamed. He screamed and screamed, horrified and terrified in equal measure, as the full implications of his failure, of the terrible power of these eyes slammed into him. Over 300 men. Killed in less than 3 days. The umbu that subdued the man nodded, thanking her brusquely. Itachi did not have the time to listen, or even the will to. Her mind was exhausted. Her chakra reserves spent. She needed rest, both in mind and body. She felt drained, worn down to the bone. So why was she so restless? Her skin itched, and her bones were charged with electricity. The sparse room she'd been given at the outpost felt all at once too stifling and too empty. Something was wrong. Her heavy cloak was hung on the wall, her change of clothes feeling itchy and too clean having been freshly washed. Her skull was pounding with pain from the illusion and her own restlessness. Something was wrong. She stood up and paced her room, her body vibrating like a charged coil even after 3 days of no sleep. Then she got her answer. A toad, one shrouded with chakra. At the sight of her Sharingan, I lapped onto the windowsill. She approached the thing. It was a lesser one incapable of even speech. A spy, a scout. Nothing more. Did he send one to check on her? He would, or was he calling for help? Saying something else? He wouldn't do that. If he was in danger, he wouldn't call her to step into it with him. But the toads would. A summoned animal appearing in the world without a summoner was a limited thing. Never could something like Gamabunta or even a more intelligent beast be capable of self-summoning. Too much chakra required to bridge the worlds. But something like this? A small little creature, little better than a native toad, that they could do. Itachi's brain roiled, momentary indecision as the toad sat on the windowsill. She stretched out her hand, beckoning it closer, and the little creature leapt onto her hand. She had a mission. There would be a second wave soon. And it was up to her to be here in case something went amiss, in case Tsunade and Orochimaru failed, and the attack arrived in full force. That was her job. Her mission, not to rescue him. Or worse, abandon her post entirely for no reason if he were not in trouble at all. All of her training, all of her knowledge, every part of her mind told her where she needed to be. Where she needed to stay. And yet, the toad croaked once, its slimy pads resting on her palm before it vanished in a puff of gray smoke, its limited chakra finally running dry. She made her decision. The scouts of the outpost were surprised, and curious as out from the inner fortress a murder of crows suddenly burst out of the buildings, cawing and shrieking into the night as they flew north that very night. Kakashi had learned long ago to trust his instincts, that little disquiet at the back of your mind that insisted. Something's wrong. It had kept him alive through many a conflict that should have killed him, and though right here and now, within the Kage Tower of Konohagakure, he didn't feel as though he was in danger, as though there were eyes on the back of his head, or a dagger waiting to slip between his ribs. Nevertheless, the feeling persisted. Something's wrong. It was a restlessness that gripped him, distracting enough to keep him from focusing on the reports in front of him, and the paperwork that still needed doing for all the logistical concerns. Something's wrong. He racks his brain, trying to think of what could have placed this feeling there, what could have made it so insidious and insistent at the back of his thoughts that he couldn't consciously dismiss it. Something was wrong. His eyes trailed to the side of the room, where old reports sat, waiting for the secretaries and the clerks to take them away. He stood and marched over to them. His eyes panned over them again, weeks of work, reports, devoured all over again by a mind that refused to sit still, taken in with lightning speed as he took scrolls and tossed them aside when they weren't relevant. Slowly, inexorably, he poured through them, ignoring his aides even as they entered and asked him what was wrong. Finally, something clicked. It was a report. A small thing, innocuous and unimportant. He'd have never noticed. Not as it was before. Not separated by weeks and a million more reports. But here, gathered with the others of its kind, there was a discrepancy. Something was wrong. Kakashi reached down, taking 4 other scrolls, laying them down across the large oaken desk that dominated his office, his eyes darkening. Clever. His chakra flared, and after a moment Umbu bled out of the shadows of his office. We have little time to waste. Chapter 83. Akane was not, despite her parentage and upbringing, a sheltered girl. Well, not wholly sheltered at least. She'd been a ninja since she was just a little girl. A Jinchuriki for longer still. Her mother and father tried to shield her from the worst of what ninja did, and for the most part, succeeded. But there were things they couldn't hide from her. Her own missions for one. Her first kill happened less than a year ago. A Chunin that had been sneaking up on a mission with Konohamaru. She turned, punching wildly, his neck snapped. Just like that. The crying and the horror hadn't come until later, much later. But she knew what being a ninja was. The killing? That was just the easy part. It was other things that were ultimately truly horrifying. Infiltration, sabotage, assassination, these were their objectives every other day. And those were considered clean by some measures. Uncle Oro, whenever she asked him if something, would tell her. His accounts of the missions he'd been privy to were unfiltered when they weren't classified. Her uncle was unwilling, maybe even incapable of holding back the blunt and brutal truth of the matter, whatever it may be. As such, she knew what she was, what it meant to be a Jinchuriki. What her intended purpose was, when it came down to it. She was a weapon, the village's weapon to be precise. Their sword, or their shield depending on the needs of the day. As such, when she was approached by the Hokage's Umbu in the middle of the market mid-discussion with Anabi, she, perhaps, felt a bit more trepidation than any other of her peers might have. One doesn't call a Jinchuriki into the Hokage's office this abruptly unless something was very wrong. When they entered the Hokage tower, and she could almost feel the undercurrent of disquiet, of fear, her suspicion was cemented. Something was very wrong. Her mind began to wander, possibilities and scenarios emerging and being discarded just as quickly in her mind as the Umbu negotiated through the traffic of people moving this way and that way. Did they need her on the front? For a counter-attack? Did something happen to her mother? Her father? Naruto-sensei? Her heart twisted painfully in her chest, making her wince before she shoved the feeling down, feeling a heat blooming through her chest as Son Goku's chakra pulsed beneath her flesh with a soothing warmth. No. Whatever was wrong, they were fine. They were all fine. Even so, by the time they reached the double oaken doors, her palms were sweaty and her tongue felt like a cotton ball in her mouth. The Umbu pushed the door open and Akane was greeted to the sight of the Godame standing with his back to a collection of commanders in his office, staring out towards the village from the balcony doorway. The men were speaking over each other, some paced, the others hovered over a map, and others still sat in their seats, tense and quiet as they listened. Available reserves stand at just over 200. That's not enough for a proper defense. It is if we pull back from the outer walls and focus our defense in the center. Hard points, vital logistical areas. Draw them in. The collateral would be dash. Voices were raised, others joining in on the argument, descending into a cacophony of shouting and disagreements between the commanding officers. Her eyes turned this way and that way, feeling herself slowly becoming overwhelmed just by virtue of being in the room. Hokage-sama. Her Umbu escort clasped his hands together and bowed. I've retrieved Akane-sen as you requested. That made Kakashi move, turning to look back over his shoulder as his single eye found her at the door. He nodded, smiling just a bit, seemingly to reassure her, though she noted the light of it didn't quite reach his dark eye. He turned to the bickering commanders. Leave us for a moment, if you please. The men, still arguing, halted their disagreement, offering stiff bows before shuffling past her and out of the room. Akane remained, her Umbu escort stepping back to place himself by the door as Kakashi turned and walked closer to her. She stiffened where she stood. She liked the Hokage, though she couldn't claim she knew him well, but her already present nervousness seemed to magnify at his proximity. He looked down at her, hands clasped behind his back. He held himself in silence for a moment before he took a deep breath. I don't have the time to coddle you, he said before shrugging. You'll be needed soon. As a Jinchuriki. She wasn't sure if it was a statement or a question. Regardless, the Godame nodded. Yes. Where? The front was miles away. She knew Naruto-sensei was to the north, and her parents on clandestine missions. Perhaps if he said where she would be going, she could piece together what had happened somehow. Here. For a moment her brain stuttered. What did that mean? He saw the question on her face. Read it like an open scroll. Kumobikure will attack the village soon, he clarified, turning his head to look at the pile of reports and scrolls atop his desk. Only noticed a pattern recently. Same person is writing the northeastern reports. Vernacular and handwriting is too similar. He shrugged. Honestly, I may not have picked it up if not for one of the Chunin commanders having a particular signature. Irika. It was forged. They're coming here. Her eyes were wide, still trying to fathom what he was saying. No one attacked Konoha village itself, ever. They had the forest defenses, the Umbu, the Hokage himself it was. He nodded, oblivious or uncaring as to her disbelief as he turned to peer towards the village seated beyond his balcony. They are very close. A day at most, more likely than not, mere hours. They know the ruse couldn't hold forever. They would move as fast as possible. He turned his eye back to her. You are Konoha's Jinchuriki, Naruto trained you, you're our last and best line of defense. He spoke slowly, emphasizing each word. Konoha is under your protection now. She felt her stomach opening up into a pit, a yawning chasm that made her feel queasy and weak. It's a lot to ask, he said. And I wouldn't ask it if I had other options, but I don't. Are you recalling others? She asked, reached. She couldn't do this, it was the village, the whole village. Her knees shook, the world seemed to spin behind her eyes. Kakashi's hand placed itself on her shoulder, bringing her eyes up to meet his as he stared at her with an uncompromising, rigid steel. You are our Jinchuriki. He emphasized every word. Every letter carrying enough weight to crush her, and his eyes told her he expected nothing less than for her to bear it. That he would accept nothing less. Konoha is under your protection. The IWA nin's blood spattered across Hinata's face, her short sword bathed in red as she turned with the movement, her free hand whipping out, fingers thrusting into another attacker's throat. The chakra burst from her jukin spilled into his body, through the skin, rupturing larynx and windpipe. He gasped, trying with his last burst of strength to cut her down before she sidestepped the strike, stepping past him and out of his fumbling reach as his vision swam and his body began to fail. She turned, marching away. She heard him take another step and another before finally collapsing, drowning on dry land. Hinata's Byakugan expanded its sight as far as it would go, searching the surrounding forest. Lee was near her, one brutally powerful kick cracking his opponent's neck with enough sheer power to nearly take his head off completely, the man flopping to the floor like a dead fish. The taijutsu master didn't give the man a second glance, rushing to Hinata's side as the mute heiress let out a shrill whistle. Seconds later, Sakura and Kyofu were by her side, both covered in blood as the IWA Chunin scattered, breaking off their attack. We have to go after him. It was Sakura who gasped out the words, breathing heavy, though Hinata got the impression it was more from adrenaline than exhaustion. She nodded regardless, her free hand moving in quick and concise signals. We will. Move north. Kyofu, stay, Sasuke, Tenten and Ryoko approaching now. Bring them. Kyofu held out her hand. With a puff of smoke there was a small lizard at her palm, the tiny creature crawling to her fingers before leaping onto Hinata's shoulder. It'll let me track you, the summoner explained. Hinata nodded then gestured. Follow. She rushed through the forest, Byakugan guiding her, following the faintest trace of Naruto's own chakra trail, Sakura and Lee at her back. The rain hissed as it fell, running down the chasm walls and pooling in the cracks and divots of the ancient reservoir. It was a constant, deafening hiss so loud it could almost drown out their thoughts. Orochimaru and Tsunade moved like two parts of the same being, lightning fast, powerful, precise and purposeful. There was no waste of movement, no hesitation, no missteps. Decades of fighting experience, fighting together could be seen in every movement, every tactic and maneuver. But still, Conan matched them, moving with that uncanny technique, vanishing when she was cornered, appearing in their blind spots, striking where they were weak. More than once she nearly killed them. More than once they just barely avoided the kiss of her blade, or the touch of a technique. Always they saved each other, or avoided the deadly attack. They could match her even with her ability. In terms of skill, experience, perhaps even instinct, they were her equal. She was not their superior. And yet, even so she could match the both of them, even working together as they were. Kuchios! Kuchios! Their voices ring out simultaneously, hers and his not an octave different. Summons burst from clouds of smoke, dozens of them, snakes and slugs both. They hissed and slithered across the earth as they surround and converge on the aim kunoichi. Slugs spew acid, serpents cough up clouds of virulent toxin. Conan's hands blur in rapid signs, a swirling typhoon of water coalescing from the rain and the reservoir around them, shielding her in one moment. There's a surge, a burst of chakra, potent and raw. The droplets of rain crystallize, becoming needles with razor-sharp points. Their summons screech and hiss as they're skewered, and it takes all their speed to form two identical earth domes to shield themselves from the deadly downpour. Tsunade's eyes find Orochimaru's in the brief reprieve. The technique was powerful, dangerous. A trump card. And it hadn't been hers. She had help. This time, when she moves, they know what to look for. And it's there, the flicker, barely noticeable, not if you weren't looking. Tsunade whirls fast as quicksilver, her blonde hair whipping about her as her fist strikes out, and nearly catches the blue-haired Aim Kunoichi right in the skull. The blow would have disintegrated everything above the neck, but Conan reacts just as fast, twisting out of the way, barely avoiding the deadly punch as she lashes out with her sword and vanishes again. The edge digs into Tsunade's shoulder, the wound heals immediately, superficial even without her abilities. Conan appears and the flicker of foreign chakra stands out, like a ripple on a lake. There. Just there, beyond sight, at the very edges of perception. Kawarimi. Orochimaru mutters before breaking into a slow, amused smile. Two of the greatest shinobi in the world. Befuddled and confused, by a simple Kawarimi. The earthen domes crumble around them and Orochimaru trails his eyes up to the sky, looking at the individual rain droplets, truly seeing them, feeling them. The chakra is infused in the rain. Tsunadeheim is just as quick as he is, it seems. He nods. Whoever this is, his control is astounding. The power it would take to control the weather. A new bloodline perhaps? Has to be. She whips her hand across the air, then cracks her knuckles as she fixes her stare on Conan. He'd be dead after a minute of this otherwise. And the infusion is too precise. Too perfect. I never would have noticed if he hadn't used so much power to turn the rain deadly. That technique must drain him. Orochimaru muses. Not something he can pull off for prolonged periods. Lucky us. The Slug Princess comments wryly. Across from them, Conan looks grim. She knows her odds of victory are much worse now. On the other hand, her partner need not be so subtle anymore. Deal with her or find the partner? Tsunade asks. Orochimaru takes a moment to consider. Her first. He answers, the Kusanagi cutting across the downpour. He'll reveal himself when she's in danger. Kuratsuchi's legs burn as she runs, pushing herself faster and faster, rushing through the trees of Hino Kuni's dense forest, forcing herself to catch up with Fukuro, whose speed is still a match for high-ranking ninja half his age. She doesn't let herself feel tired, doesn't let herself dwell on what the hell she's going to do, what she's going to say, or even if there's anything she can say. Han, Sasori, Deidara are somewhere behind her, their chakra signatures just at the edge of her perception. The Konoha ninja not far behind them, following, chasing. She can't rescue him. They can. All they need is for her to buy them time. If she's not even good for that, the fuck is she good for anymore? She sees him, the both of them, just ahead, and she pushes herself to move with that bit of extra speed, that little bit faster that's just beyond what her own body and skill can handle, nearly sending herself careening off the treetops to crash somewhere with a broken neck before she shouts. Stop. It comes out firm, with more authority than she has, more assuredness than she feels. The old owl turns to look over his shoulder, finding her, and slows his pace, not by much, just enough for her to catch up. She tries to school her features, tries to regain the professionalism that's been slowly slipping between her fingers like sand through currents. She catches up, and he's beside her, and she wonders what to say, what she can do. She doesn't have time for subtlety, she doesn't have time to think. That Tsuchikage and her Umba weren't far to begin with, hours at most, and at their speed even that would have been cut down to almost nothing by now. Give him to me, she says. Turn back. Hold them off. The old Nuknin eyes her, his eyes shrewd and calculating. Too forward, he knows something's up. His suspicions are raised. Give him to me, she repeats. Demands. The suspicion is naked now, and the slow, rolling smirk that stretches over his lips is mocking, cruel. He shifts his stance, and when he lands on the next branch he brings himself to a dead stop. Kuratsuchi leaps once more, bleeding away her own speed before she comes to a stop herself, rounding on the man as she stands at the trunk of a tree. He shifted his grip on the unconscious Uzumaki, using his free hand to grasp a kunai from its holster, spinning the blade by the ring pommel. "Tell me," he drawled, his canines seeming almost predatory in the row of teeth he showed off in his vicious smile. He kneels quietly, setting Naruto down beside him on the tree branch, the kunai hovering in his grip. "When did the lines start getting blurry for you, little princess? When did you start having second thoughts?" She fought down the urge to curse, hoping against hope she could dissuade him from the conclusion he'd so clearly reached already. "I have no doubts," she snarled. "This is just the best option." Their time was cut short, Han, Sasori, and even the lagging, wounded Deidara rushing in through the trees. "Why are we stopping?" Han demanded, staring down at them from a high vantage in the canopy above. "Aye, princess." Fukuro smiled, cruel laughter lighting up his eyes. "Why are we stopping?" She stood there, watching as all of her avenues, all of her possibilities and options slammed shut. One by one, every alternative evaporating. Her eyes trailed from Fukuro to the blonde he'd captured. Her friend, even now, after everything. He was still her friend. One of the only ones she had left. Her eyes turned to Fukuro. She saw the smile on his face slip, crumble away. Perhaps he could see the switch, flipping in her mind, the moment she simply stopped caring. Caring about the pretense. Caring about her future, caring about herself. He tried to move the blade, shifting to a more firm hold, descending down on the blonde. He was fast. She hadn't been lying when she told him she was faster. Kuto's sword was in her hand, a flash of steel nearly slicing the man's arm at the wrist before he pulled away, leaping back as he drew his own sword to clash against hers with a ring of steel. The others didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. She turned, standing over Naruto now as she spewed molten lava from her lips, catching one of Sasori's puppets mid-dive, forcing the others to scatter. Rock armor encased her forearm, bringing the limb up to block a strike from Han, who came at her from directly above. Her body held under the force, the stone shattering over her skin but doing enough to absorb the blow. She was still standing. The tree branch under her feet wasn't so sturdy. Her feet caved in the wood with a deafening crack. It shattered after holding for a brief moment, sending Naruto and herself plummeting down to the earth. She twisted mid-fall, using chakra and what little control she had to leap off the splinters and pieces of tree bark falling around her to change her trajectory. One arm wrapped around the blonde's waist to grab hold of him, clutching him close as she descended to the ground below. She twisted again, eyes finding the light of the sun peeking through the canopy above as Han and the others pursued, chasing her like wolves chase a bleeding animal. Kakashi has always understood the meaning of the role of Kage. You're a military commander, the highest authority of your village, the ultimate voice of control and power besides the daimyo himself. This is where the chain of command stops. This is where the prosperity, even the existence of the village itself can and will be decided. But it's in these few moments hovering before the encroaching battle, where he feels their alarms and final warning systems trigger, lancing bright flares across the senses of the ninja, that he comes to the realization that it's only now, here, that he's beginning to understand what a Kage is. "Sir?" His Umbu commander, Kojiro, speaks. "We have confirmation. North, northeast, and east sides." He wants to ask how many, but it doesn't matter. The answer will be the same: too many. Instead, he compartmentalizes, prioritizes. There is a way to win, though not cleanly. Not painlessly. He has minutes at best. The civilians are still in mid-evacuation to the shelters and designated defensive hardpoints. Nothing for it. They might all die if he hesitates. Perhaps Hiruzen could have found a better way. Perhaps he would have always been the better Kage. But he isn't Hiruzen. And he doesn't have time to pretend to be or dwell on his failings. Engage Autumn Protocol. There's a moment of hesitation, a moment of doubt. He can't blame them. Confirmed. Minutes later, as the first of the Kumo ninja breached the barrier system around and crept into the walls, the outer edges of the village erupt in fire. The rain hissed. Like an angry, terrible beast it hissed and fell, droplets the size of rocks harshly cutting into them, sheer icy cold biting down to the marrow. Her ally revealed, now Conan held nothing back, nor did her assistants. She flickered in and out of reality, replacing herself with individual raindrops to evade danger and strike from seemingly every angle at once. Mid-strike she would suddenly be behind them. A blow that should have cut into her flesh was suddenly off point, the raindrops obscuring their sight just enough for the woman, or her benefactor, to cast the most subtle of genjutsu, just long enough to send the attack off target. Water converged and thrashed about, crushing earth walls and smothering flames. Moisture parted like waves breaking over rocks to avoid lightning techniques. Their own control of water slipped out of their grasp for even the most basic and rudimentary jutsu. She was skilled, powerful, and the one assisting her more powerful still. They had her outnumbered, but it was rapidly becoming clear, the ones in danger were the two of them, not the aim kunoichi. Tsunade's palms cracked like a thunderbolt as she slammed them together, pure concussive force visibly rippling out of the blow like a wave, scattering the falling rain, buying them a moment's respite as Orochimaru's fist slammed down into the earth. His chakra sank deep into the basin of the reservoir, warping, twisting, pulling soil, rock and metal as spears lanced out of the ground. Wide and jagged they were thrust towards the sky around them. They had to make some shelter, cut her off more permanently from the rain. The shelter had gaps, openings, too many of them, but it was better than nothing. Paper cranes fluttered about the woman's shoulders as she formed her hand signs, the individual birds glowing with the razor-sharp power of wind chakra. The birds flew, and with laughable ease, sliced the stone pillars hanging over them, letting the rain cascade down once again as the rocks fell. Tsunade leapt, twisted, and with two spinning kicks, the pillars were sent hurtling towards the aim kunoichi like lances. She dodged the first, twisting out of its way before lightning lanced through the second, thorns of crackling energy splitting from the main body to sunder the earth to pieces, shattering it. Then the Kusanagi blade cut through water, lightning, and finally bit into flesh. Perhaps her ally was tiring, perhaps the rapid array of jutsu, chakra, or other factors had let his attacks slip through their notice. Either way, the result was the same. One slice, barely enough to be called a wound, a scratch along her forearm. But it was there. Conan gasped, flickering once more out of existence before she reappeared meters away, cradling her arm close, red blood with the taint of black poison now spreading across the silk clothes she wore. He pulled the blade back, the handle cracking loudly against his palm as the woman hissed, her eyes wild, hateful. "Press the attack!" he demanded, rushing forward, Tsunade at his side. The slug princess hands slammed together again, the shockwave sending the rain once more scattering everywhere, rippling over Conan, isolating her for the brief window they needed to try and capitalize on the opening. She stood her ground, grit teeth and raw, unbridled hatred shining clear through her eyes. The Kusanagi found the steel of her blade when he swung. He struck again, trying to slip past her guard, but she slipped through his own in the movement. She was swift and sure-footed, spinning once to slip past the kunai slice and pivoting to drive her elbow up into the charging Tsunade's sternum. The blow struck, he felt and heard the breath rush free from his teammate's lungs, but she still had her strength. Her hands grabbed hold of the kunoichi's wrist, but the water that soaked them all to the bone moved, unnaturally, making her grip slick like oil. Conan slipped through her grasp and stepped over a sweeping kick that tried to trip up her retreat. They didn't let up, infinitesimal seconds ticking by as the rain began to descend again, the concussive force Tsunade had used finally slipping away to let the deluge continue. Conan was fast. Faster than them. But for now at least, it was 2 against 1. She tried to leap to reach the rain droplets herself, but a serpent coiled around her ankle, yanking her back down to the earth. She stumbled, her tanto slicing off his summon's head, but it bought them enough time. She doesn't have time to bring her blade to bear, she has to dodge, stepping to the side, and Tsunade's kick is primed, launching itself like a missile where she chambered it. Conan's arm, raised in a desperate block to avoid the blow catching her in the ribs, shatters. He sees the limb twist and break, hears the bones snap and crack like dried twigs. There's pain on her face, agony even, but she digs in her heels, using chakra to force herself to keep still, to not let herself go flying with the force of the blow. Something in her left leg gives out, her tendon, or perhaps another bone. Her weight shifts precariously, but she holds her ground. The sheer force of will it must have taken, she is extraordinary. Her blade moves, flashing like a sliver of quicksilver in moonlight, and the only reason Tsunade isn't beheaded outright is because Orochimaru's own limb moved just as fast, angling it. The edge of Conan's tanto cuts through his arm, from the bend of the elbow nearly to the wrist, like peeling the layer of a salmon fillet. It does not stop, even after it scrapes against bone, until it's ripping free of his hand, 3 fingers sheared off. The pain is blinding but momentary. A second later his specialized kawarimi sees him pull free a fresh body out of his own mouth, shedding his skin like a serpent. He feels dizzy, the drain on his reserves is immediate, but he doesn't have the time to hesitate. Doesn't have the time to let himself regain his bearings. The sack of flesh that was his previous body moves. The remains of the damaged arm fumbling to grasp onto Conan's silk sleeve, the other holding aloft the Kusanagi. He grabs hold of his legendary sword, feeling the edge cut deep into his own fingers as he grips the blade, yanks it free of the dying hold his previous body has and plunges it into Conan's shoulder. The rain cascades down. The woman vanishes, reappearing again, meters away now, on her knees. She is a ruin. Blood and broken bones at long last. Still, she struggles to her feet on failing limbs. The waters of the basin roil. The rain pours down harder. Orochimaru hears her, her voice barely a whisper. No, don't! The water rises, and with a swirling, churning tide, it envelopes her, and washes her away. He and Tsunade pursue. It's not fear that Kuratsuchi can feel. Not anymore. It's not anger, or panic, or even sadness. Perhaps it was all of these things, blurring together so intensely and so indistinctly that her mind has settled, or perhaps simply stopped fully registering what it is. She feels numb. As though her emotions were covered in mud, smothered and nearly silent to her mind. She holds Naruto close. The blonde is pale, his breathing shallow. She can feel the sticky warmth of his blood seeping through her clothes, and the only real feeling she has left, piercing like a sharp point through her ribs, is the vague sense of horror that he might still die, even as she tries to save him. Han, Fukuro and Sasori chase her. She sends clones and decoys, uses explosive tags as traps, lights fires and does everything in her power to stay one step ahead of the three even as she runs closer and closer towards where she hopes the Konoha pursuit is. She's fast. But Naruto weighs her down, and both Han and Sasori can outlast her. Her limbs are mortal, bone and muscle, sinew and flesh. The other is a hateful creature empowered by a demon, and the last a thing of wood and metal, tireless and ceaseless. She senses the danger before she sees it, and it's all she can do to arrest her forward movement, taking cover behind a tree before a cloud of boiling hot steam crashes over the area, breaking and parting around the tree she uses as a shield like water over a rock. The heat is scalding and she clutches Naruto tight, pressing him between herself and the tree. The cloud passes and she pitches herself off the side of the branch. A forest of knives and blades is waiting for her at the underbrush. Sasori's army of puppets. Reaping and scything blades nearly take her before she stops herself, standing on the bark as the puppets skitter and climb up the mighty oak like insects. She draws the daimyo's sword, her chakra flowing easily into the blade like water into a canal. It channels and focuses, flames leap across its surface bright red with flecks of black that are not hers. Madara's influence. It's enough to send the first puppets reeling. Sasori doesn't wish to lose more, they're not out of danger. She hears a crash above, wood breaking, leaves cascade down around her. Han. She spits out a river of molten rock. The drain on her reserves is immediate and sudden, almost enough to make her dizzy. But the fire flows, it sends the tree, the forest, and so much more bursting into flames. 2 more of Sasori's puppets are consumed before they can get out of the way. She twists and turns, scattering as much fire as much destruction as wide as she can. Sasori's monsters scatter, and she leaps down to the forest floor. They're on her almost immediately. Her blade deflects sickle-tipped arm before deflecting a kunai. She clutches Naruto to her, trying to shield him as her blade whips and lashes around her. She feels pain at the back of her legs, Saban poisoned. The burning starts immediately, but still she twists her body and strikes out to shield Naruto as best she can before her chakra spears into the earth, opening it up beneath her feet to swallow the both of them. She can't stay here long, seconds at most. He's unconscious, he can't breathe. It's all she herself can do to keep dirt and rock from pouring into his nose and airways. More of the earth parts and splits, and she rushes away, nearly blind in the mad dash to escape. She rushes back to the surface, and for all she knows it could be directly under Han's feet. She bursts from the ground still in the forest, the glow of rapidly spreading fires not too far. She's still in danger. The both of them are, but she'd bought them at least a moment's respite. She grips Naruto tightly to herself, all but dragging them to rest at the base of a tree as she struggles to catch her breath. Her chest is heaving, her lungs are burning, the poison is snaking up her leg now, and she wonders how lethal this concoction is, or to be more specific, how long it'll take to kill her. All of Sasori's poisons are lethal. She doesn't want to die, but she can't really think of many reasons she should want to live either. She's not sure if that's sad or pathetic. Her pink eyes turn to Naruto, she could almost convince herself he's sleeping. She clutches him tighter. I don't even know why, she whispers to the wind. She can almost convince herself the tears stinging her eyes are from the smoke, and the heat of the rapidly growing flames. "Were we ever friends?" She half laughs, half sobs, feeling the words choking her as she tries to suck down a strangled breath. "Part of some big, fucking joke where I was the punchline?" Koto had claimed it was betrayal. But the man could wield lies and half-truths to make them more devastating than any ninja technique. How much of her time in his palace had been real? How much of it had just been an act? A puppet show for her benefit? She clutches him tighter. No. No, she knows why, because she knows Naruto. If it had all been a lie, if the whole thing had been nothing but a fabrication, everyone could have been in on it. Koto, the servants, even Itachi. Everyone. But not Naruto. "Not you," she cried. "I can trust that, right?" Her home, the trust of her village, her reputation, her importance, her friendships, every single one of them could be a lie. But he wasn't. She could trust that. It was the only thing she had left to trust in. "Find her!" Han's shout was a deep guttural thing, exploding from the man's heavy mask like a boom. Sasori listened to it, his ire rankling at the Jinchuriki's audacity at giving them orders. He was close, so very close to simply cutting his losses and abandoning this as a failed venture. The Uzumaki had nearly killed him, nearly 24 of his 100 puppets had been destroyed already, 2 of their number were injured, 1 dead, and now their commanding officer was a traitor. It was the tantalizing promise of the reward at the end of this road, wounded pride and rage that kept him in place. But that was a tenuous, fragile hold as he listened to the crackling of the flames and watched the land begin to burn around him. He spread out his puppets. A sheet of wood and steel bodies, blooming outward across the trees and forest floor. She couldn't be far. He had to wonder what had possessed her to be so foolish. She had murdered the daimyo of Hai no Kuni. Even if she succeeded in returning the Mokutan from Iwabakure's clutches, execution was the only outcome for her. Iwa would have held her in a place of near hero worship, her loyalty and value without question. What rank stupidity made her decide that this was her best option? He didn't know, and frankly, outside of a mild, niggling sense of curiosity, he did not care. Fukuro lingered nearby, the old mercenary kneeling atop the branch of a tree like a gargoyle, distant from all. Deidara, wounded, dying, near useless, hovered in the trees far above. He would be easy to kill after this. His share of the reward could serve to fund all the repairs his puppets would need, refurbishing the expended ammunition, weaponry, materials and time nicely. Han stalked the grounds like a caged animal. For all the destruction of his artificial limb had diminished his size, the Jinchuriki looked no less destructive for its absence. A mad beast straining at an all too flimsy leash. The wind picked up, rustling the trees and feeding the flames. They grew higher, the smoke more overpowering. Even his own synthetic senses were being mildly obstructed. He tilted his head. There. As one, his army of automatons turned, pointing southwest. Han took off like a plow through the snow, tearing apart the forest in his haste and force, rushing after to kill both her and the Uzumaki he was so frightened of. Sasori moved, ready to follow himself. Then he was under attack. The strike hit him in the back, a chakra burst sinking through the false flesh of his primary body, and every sense, every sensation, every thought and order that came from or left his core was suddenly and violently cut off. He wondered, not with insignificant panic, if he'd died. Then the redundancies kicked in, emergency safeguards protecting him, reviving him. Life surged through him and his puppets again, and he moved them immediately to surround him, protect him. An influx of sudden sensory overload hit him like a blow to the head, and it was all he could do to keep his mind from splintering and fragmenting before he made sense of all the disparate pieces of data. He'd fallen from the heights in the boughs, Fukuro, under attack by a Konoha nin in green. Deidara, above, struggling to fend off another Akunoichi. A Hyuga stood above, her Byakugan eyes flared, the veins bulging beneath her flesh. She'd slipped past his senses, navigated the entire team through the cordon of outlying scouting puppets. He recognized her. Bingo book, recent edition. A+ rank. The Wolf's Apprentice. This one was dangerous. She drew a gleaming tanto, a spark crackling along its edge before the length of metal exploded in blinding white, and all he could hear was the chirping of 1,000 screeching birds. Chapter 85. They descend, streams and eddies of water chasing their footsteps and leading them forward, all the while following the wounded animal that is the aim Kunoichi Konin. Deep, deep down into the depths of the earth, where the weight of rock and iron and rain seemed to press down from the world above. It is a gorge they step into now, deep, like some god cracked the earth clean in two, splitting it open to leave this nasty scar, worn deep by running water and time. The rain hisses as it falls, chasing them further in. Still they descend. Visitors, the sound, because it is a sound, not a voice, makes them go still. The sound is in the water. Little droplets rising and falling into their pools, streams churning and sloshing, a symphony of 1,000 disparate noises turning into a chorus that can formulate words. Our first visitors in a very long time. A pause, the waters cascade once again, filling the silence. May you be welcome here. Orochimaru looks to Tsunade and she to him, either of them saying a word, but the warning and trepidation passing unspoken easily between them. Such a level of control, over such a great distance. Whoever this was, he was dangerous. Not even the Nidaime could boast such a refined control over the element of water. They draw their weapons and continue their descent. There is no single defensive line within a shinobi village for its protection. The defense is divided into layers, redundancies, and mutually supporting systems. The forests, the walls, alarms, traps, hidden passages, illusions, and more. All of them could and would be brought to bear. All villages had these systems. All villages had their own means of self-defense. But no matter how formidable a wall, or powerful a fortress, it is useless if there are no soldiers to man it. Konoha had used Iwa's lack of manpower to attack them at the very heart of their country years ago. I was not above taking a page from the same book to use himself. Konohagakure's ninja were stretched dangerously thin along their border, the daimyo's forces committed at least for the immediate moment elsewhere. This was, frankly, Kumogakure's best chance. Over 200 shinobi, every last one of them a jounin. It accounted for nearly 2/3 of those of jounin rank within the active branch of the military. Maintaining secrecy as they made their way through Konoha's heavily patrolled lands had been a monumental undertaking, but it had been achieved. The evidence of how unprepared Konoha was for their attack was self-evident when Hitaki, for no one else would have dared to give such an order, nor would have had the authority to do so, destroyed the entire outer ring of the city, walls included, in a massive explosion as the first wave breached the outer barrier. The casualties were not grievous. Hitaki was not that good, and A was not that stupid. It was a warning, perhaps even a bluff, something born of desperation, make them overcautious, stall for time. Perhaps with another Kage it may have worked. Even so, the village was wreathed in fire. The flames burned hot and tall. The heat was stifling even outside in the forest, and the smoke hung low and heavy. This was no natural blaze. Press the attack! A snarled to his commanders. The longer we give them, the more time they'll have to prepare defenses like this. We can't afford to be bogged down here. He turned his eyes towards Yujito, meeting the Jinchuriki's gaze with a nod. You know your target. And you? The younger woman asked. The Reikage sneered, staring into the burning city. I'm skinning a wolf before we leave. Every civilian in a shinobi village knew what steps to take in the event of an attack. It's drilled into them at least twice a year, every year, from the moment they become citizens or come of an age where they can understand the concept of a foreign invasion. Every child knew where to go, every adult what roads to take, every veteran and retiree where the rally and hardpoints are located. Emergency shelters, secret paths leading out of the village, or genjutsu-shrouded passages to lead counterattacks and ambushes. They knew this. Even so, there is one thing to drill for an emergency, quite another to be living through it. Hanabi had noticed before any of her peers, because how could she not, when throngs of ninja were removing people, sometimes forcibly, from an area. It's not a subtle process. They knew an attack was coming. However, she noticed the flames before she heard the village-wide alarm. From there, it didn't take long after that for things to descend into near-complete pandemonium. The civilians knew where they should go. But they needed to stop first. They needed to be all but told. Where was their husband? Their wife? Their children? What exactly was happening? How close was the attack? Where were the defense forces? Was this another drill? She could see the questions quietly rolling behind the windows of their eyes. Then they saw the flames, the smoke. Then the questions turned to urgency, and from urgency it was quickly escalating to something beyond control. By the time Hanabi caught sight of the first enemy shinobi to force his way through the wall of fire that had enveloped the outer layer of the city, the civilians were in near anarchy. Being completely honest, she herself had to fight down the urge to flee to the Hyuga compound, to her father, where that small, childlike part of her knew she'd be safe within its walls, but, fighting it down or not, she did resist the urge, instead turning and rushing as fast as she could towards the nearest designated rally point near the north fountains, Konohamaru, Undone and Moigi right behind her. Her Byakugan was active, the veins bulging around her eye sockets, so it was child's play to see who had already arrived before she was anywhere near the point. What she saw was worrying. She knew that the bulk of their forces were far from the village, holding the border outposts, and bleeding the enemy along the forests, the hinterlands and distant towns. Even so, at the sight of only Chunin, mainly administrators and office workers she recognized from the many times she'd gone to pick up or report a mission completed in the Hokage offices, and not a single jounin in sight sent her stomach opening into a chasm. It was dismaying in a way she couldn't really describe. She swallowed down the anxiety, forced down the spike of fear and something that was disconcertingly close to panic, and kept moving. In Akane's memories, the view of the village from the Hokage Tower was one of the more breathtaking sights one could enjoy within the village walls. Now, she felt that memory being ripped apart. She didn't think she could ever look down on the village from this vantage again without seeing the flames rising, encircling the village like a burning serpent, all the while the Hokage stood impassively by her side. She tried to hold her silence, tried to hold on to the discipline and deference that was expected of shinobi in a crisis situation, especially before the Hokage. But as the flames rose and the sound of screams began to waft up from the village below, she felt her tenuous hold over her composure fray and snap. At the absolute least, she had enough presence of mind to think about what she needed to ask, what she needed to say, before she actually opened her mouth. "Where do you need me?" Kakashi turned his head, eyeing her for a moment before turning away. "Right here beside me, at least for a little while longer." She bit her lip, hard enough she could swear she'd drawn bits of blood from cuts that rapidly healed thanks to Gokukuen. Why? She wanted to scream. People were fighting and dying. They were the two strongest ninja in the village. Why were they just sitting up here when they should be going down there? To the door swung open behind them. Akane turned, so did the Godame. To her shock and naked confusion, rather than an Umbu or Chunin commander there, it was Yugogo and Sasami. Then, to her greater surprise still, Kakashi wasted little time as he stepped forward, and clearly, addressing the 6-year-old girl, bowed low. Deferentially low. "Princess. It is good that you're safe." Akane's brain seemed to catch and stutter and her skull did. Sasami? Did he just? The Hokage pivoted, stepping in a way that he could easily turn his gaze between both herself and Sasami. "We have little time. We have to move under the presumption that Kumogakyu knows of the heir apparent's identity and get her to safety. Akane, along with myself and my personal guard, will escort the both of you to an emergency passage that will get you out of the village. Once that's done, we can try to salvage what's left of a defense." Akane's brain scrambled to make sense of what she was hearing. Heir apparent? Heir apparent. Sasami. A Hokage, a Jinchuriki, and several Umbu? Yugogo's voice did not sound incredulous, but her expression betrayed her. "That's the only amount of firepower I have available to me that can potentially hold off the 2 Jinchuriki that Kumo has to their name," Kakashi interrupted blandly. The purple-haired woman tensed, her hand clutching tightly at Sasami's as the girl shifted beside her, biting her lip as she looked down. "You think they'd commit both Jinchuriki to this attack?" "I would," the man known as the Blood Wolf of Konoha said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He turned his exposed eye to the dark-haired 6-year-old. "You must be kept out of their hands." There was a rumble, a tremble snaking up from their boots as the blooming flare of an explosion outside bathed one side of the room in orange light. Kakashi rounded on Akane, the Jinchuriki, who was not even a Chunin, straightened under his gaze. "This is your mission," he said gravely. I fixed on hers. "It has been your mission for weeks, though you did not know it," he admitted gravely. "You are guarding the heir to the seat of the Fire Court. You will not hesitate, you will not fail. You will kill everything that gets in her path to safety. Am I understood?" She could almost see his snarl even through the mask. Akane swallowed thickly, feeling the apple lodge itself in her throat before her eyes darted away from the intense, demanding gaze of the Godame, and towards the near whimpering child clutching Yugogo's hand. She nodded, forcing the words through her constricted voice box. "Yes, sir." He offered a single, firm nod. "Good." Before turning his back to her, addressing Yugogo, Sasami, and the rest of his guard. "Let's go." He was not Sarutobi Hiruzen. Perhaps the old man would have had a better answer, a better plan. Perhaps the old man would have had the ability to sally out and rally the meager defenders the village had and drive a counter-attack fierce enough to push the attackers back. The old man had that charisma, that spirit of fire, as he called it. Kakashi wasn't Hiruzen. He was the blood wolf, and his way of fighting was not like the monkey lord. He dealt in facts, hard numbers, and calculated tactics more than the old man. Variables he could predict, factors he could control or take into account. As he moved swiftly through the village, a coterie of his personal guard fanning out to protect himself, Yugogo, Sasami, and Akane behind him, his mind moved as quickly as his body. Kimo had managed to sneak a force through their lines and into the village while it was undefended. The chances of victory here were slim. The core of elite Jounin and available Umbu within the village walls couldn't even scratch at 100. Chunin and Genin were the bulk of the available forces at his disposal, and most of those were administrators, censor nin, intelligence workers, or barely out of the academy recruits who'd never seen combat. Collectively, these were all the ninja who never expected to face open battle at this point in their career. They would have their orders to fight, and likely, most would do so, but he was not stupid enough to believe well wishes and dreams would suddenly make his force the equivalent to the elite cadre A had forced through miles of sensors and patrols to strike at their unprotected underbelly. The only saving grace they had was that A couldn't have snuck that many of his forces through. At the absolute best, 300, and even that number would be optimistic for A. It was likely closer to half that. Not nearly enough to hold the village, no. This was a raid. A came here to eliminate targets, cause damage, demoralize the village and its people, and then flee. This, Kakashi could use. If you know what they're after, you know where they're going, what to defend and what to surrender. The scroll of secrets and other forbidden techniques, intelligence reports, troop numbers, damage to key infrastructure points, the silk farms, the water and grain silos, the treasury. Assassinations were, of course, another avenue of attack. All of the existing clan heads, or their respective heirs. The village council. Any elite jounin such as Mato Guy and the village himself, obviously. And Sasami. But not all of these targets were viable. Not all took priority. He'd taken what little time he had to mix in false and contradictory intelligence reports with the valid ones, removing those deemed critical in nature. The forbidden techniques, evacuated deep into the bowels of the village by the remnants of Root on his order. Not all of the clan heads or the heirs were within the village, and A could not know which was and which was not. They would not be directly targeted save perhaps the Hyuga. The same went for Mato Guy and other high-ranking jounin like him. That narrowed down the avenues of attack. Infrastructure and logistical damage he could not prevent, but he could repair. So that just left two. Sasami and himself. It was why he pooled so very much of the village's available battle strength here. The thrust of this attack, if it was aimed anywhere, would be squarely on himself and the girl. As if to prove his point, he sensed a warning pulse from one of his guard. His single visible eye turned, finding the guard in question when the man suddenly swerved, diverting his trajectory to bleed off his speed shortly before a crackling flash blasted apart the house and tore apart the street in front of them. Kakashi grunted, turning his head away to weather the smattering of dust, rock and wood as the crackling, snapping body of A, wreathed head to toe and lightning stalked forward. Going somewhere, Hokage! His guard moved to cover his flanks. Yui. His censor spoke discreetly, her voice masked by a minor genjutsu so only his ears could hear. He's alone. Arrogant. Kakashi shook his head. Clearing a path, signaling everyone where their target is. We can take him down quick, the woman suggested. No such thing with A. Kakashi cautioned, calmly beginning to remove his overly encumbering robe. His mind ticked along like clockwork. Thinking, examining, prioritizing. The calculus was clear. Hokage or not, there were more than several candidates that could easily take up the position. Kuto's heir, however, was a different matter. If she died, the claims of succession would grip Haino Kuni in even greater political and civil unrest. The mostly subdued civil strife would boil over again, and then their enemies, all of them, would smell blood in the water. Keep her alive above all else. That was the priority. Even if A burned down the whole of the village and slaughtered every ninja within, somehow it would not cause nearly as much lasting damage. Of the available manpower here to protect the girl, he was the expendable one. Protect Sasami Dano dash, he ordered. Continue towards Point Zaritas. His guard, to their credit, only gave minute shows of surprise, all four of them stiffening, but giving no other protest. Yes, sir. I won't be stopping you, he said. The massive mountain of muscle that was the Reikage sneered in response. As if you can stop me, Hataki dash! The man's eye snapped behind the Godame Hokage, towards Yugogo and the frightened girl cradled in the purple-haired Kunoichi's arms. The only warning any of them had was a slight bunching of A's powerful legs before the man shot forward like a living lightning bolt. Kakashi's hands slammed down onto the ground. Doton dash! Even at the blinding speed, Kakashi's eyes could just spy the minute flinch, the befuddled confusion in A's body as he registered the word. An earth technique? Against his living lightning armor? A's fist smashed against Yugogo's face, punching straight through. What should have been blood and bone and gray matter was instead a splatter of mud, the woman and the sesame in her arms melting away into sludge. Around it on him, only to see dozens of the exact copies of the woman, and the guards around her rushing away in nearly all directions. Your fight is with me, Reikage. Kakashi straightened from his crouch, glaring at the man with an eye that glinted in the midday sun. Akane shut her eyes tight, feeling the earth shift and move around her as she was dragged beneath the soil by the Hokage's technique. It was a struggle to not fight the hold his power had on her in reflex when she first felt it. She was Konoha's Jinchuriki, on paper, the strongest ninja within the village, but right now she felt like anything but that. She hadn't even seen the Reikage move before his fist had smashed through the mud clone of Yugogo, and yet Hokage Kakashi had not only seen it, but reacted to it in time to pull off multiple earth techniques. She felt inadequate, out of place. Before the disquiet could fully settle, she felt herself breach the earth and smashed outwards, hitting the ground in a tumble as the bright light of the sun stung her eyes through her eyelids. A hand gripped her shoulder, and she opened her eyes to find Yugogo looming over her, clutching Sasami to her chest and shoulder. Come on! She barked. We have to keep moving! The woman didn't wait for her, and before she'd even left her sight, Akane was scrambling to her feet, rushing to follow. The screams came in earnest now, like a baleful hiss from the village around them, the voices echoing through the street like a dirge. She couldn't tell if it was battle cries or civilians caught in the bloodshed. Perhaps it was both. Whatever the truth, she pushed the thought out of her mind, fingers rising to almost clutch at her ears to drown out the sound before she forced them to her sides again, knowing that her sense of hearing was vital to detecting a potential attack as she followed Yugogo and two of the Hokage's Umbu that had linked up with them through the tight city streets. How much farther? Yugogo demanded. Not far, we're dash. The man's answer was cut off, and inexperienced as she was, even she felt the massive surge of chakra. Close. Too close. It crashed over them like a gale, and somewhere deep in her chest she felt Goku stirring as he rumbled, and knew immediately the source of this power. Jinchuriki, the Umbu, Yugogo as well, moved in near perfect synchronicity, the guard's hands slamming down onto the earth to form a broad and thick earth bulwark before a wave of black-purple flames crashed over it, with Yugogo taking the extra step of physically curling herself over the screaming Sasami to shield her further, as the fires broke and parted over the earth. After just a few seconds, she could smell the stone burning, and with thunderous cracks the earth wall dried and splintered before crumbling away as the fires died down. A woman marched through the rubble, negotiating herself with lithe, graceful movements over the debris, her arms and legs wreathed in dark fire. The two Umbu drawing their swords as Yugogo backed away. Well, the Kunoichi drawled with a smirk. What have we here? She stepped forward, almost literally as though it were a catwalk, slow and languid, unconcerned. These are some quality guards for someone with such a low-born pedigree. She laughed. Yugogo sneered, gritting her teeth. What spy was it then, Kumo? Wouldn't you like to know? The woman chuckled, examining the dark flames on her arm. The deal is simple, hand over the girl and you might just live through this day. I'd rather avoid scarring the poor thing. Resist. And I take her from you anyway. There was a crackle, and quick as a bolt of lightning the Kumo Kunoichi's head snapped to the side, her arm rising just as fast to catch a lance of electricity shot from a nearby rooftop, the bolt crackling and forking within her grip. Run! One of the Umbu between Sasami and the Jinchuriki shouted, one hand pulling a scroll from his vest as he rushed forward, unfurling it to reveal a torrent of water the man expertly manipulated with barely a hand signal as he charged. Yugogo and the last remaining Umbu didn't hesitate, turning and fleeing immediately. Akane was not so fast, not nearly so used to this kind of battle. She stopped, torn between helping and following her orders, before the Umbu and the other who had fired the bolt of lightning from hiding had even closed half the distance. The woman tossed the bolt to the ground, the crackling energy exploding as it struck dirt, kicking up a cloud of dust on one side of her. She used as cover to expertly weave her lithe body between a hail of shuriken and faced the remaining attacker. The water rushed onto the flames on her arm and did nothing. The fires burned without a hint of guttering under the torrent. Her hand whipped out, battering aside the Umbu's sword thrust before grabbing the man by the face. He screamed as he burned in ghostly fire. The Kuma woman's eyes darted towards the fleeing Yugogo, and Akane could see the moment her eyes focused sharply on Sasami, the heiress to the throne of Hai no Kuni. She pounced on the two, body soaring through the air, hands brandished like claws, fire trailing behind her. And just like that, the rigid, stupefied stupor that had gripped the overwhelmed daughter of Tsunade was burned away, the fires of Goku's infernal chakra swelling up from deep within her body until it overflowed from every limb and fiber of her being. Still in midair, the Kuma woman could do little more than turn her head in surprise a second before a pillar of white-hot flames slammed into her, blasting her out of the air. The concussive force knocked Yugogo off her feet, the Umbu woman falling onto her side with a cry of alarm, her body scraping along the dirt and rock as she continued to physically shield Sasami from harm. The Kuma woman smashed into the side of a nearby building. Pulling herself free, the kunoichi snarled as she marched out of the debris, settling her eyes on the red-haired genin, whose fires could melt solid stone. Akane panted, adrenaline tingling her fingertips, a mixture of euphoria and simmering anger sending her heart racing. Yanbi! The Kumonin sneered. You're not my mission girl. And you're far out of your league. She scoffed. Back off, I'd rather not kill a sister. Akane straightened, her eyes darting for a moment towards Sasami and the injured Yugogo, the little girl, with tears in her eyes, pleading desperately for the woman to get up, even as she struggled to even push herself up to her knees. Her eyes turned towards the Nibi again. Konoha, she said haltingly. And everyone in it is under my protection. Within the planes of her mind she reached out her hand and felt when Goku took hold of it firmly. His chakra surged into her, melding with her own so perfectly after a moment she couldn't tell where her own ended and his began. And a moment after that, she did not care. She saw the enemy kunoichi's eyes widen, surprise clear on her face as the wave of heat and chakra slammed into her, nearly knocking her off her feet as she braced herself. Hair now blazing orange, burning lines of chakra threading across her skin, the flames danced and surged around her. Her voice was not just hers, and they were not just said through her lips. We would see if you can burn, sister. The lightning shroud armor. Powerful, versatile, and at the moment proving it deserved every last ounce of its feared reputation. As Kakashi moved, dodging and weaving as best he could, his analytical mind broke down its various strengths while trying to decipher any potential weaknesses. Increased speed was certainly its greatest gift. For a man already lauded for his incredible speed, it was all the Godame Hokage could do to keep up, and even then, just barely. He got the feeling that the only real limit on that speed was A's perception, similar to his own failed technique the Raikiri. His own eyes, after a point, couldn't keep up. Not that Kakashi could capitalize on the openings A provided when he overshot his strikes. The shroud was also an all-encompassing defense, the crackling, forking lightning battering aside kunai and shuriken with ease and would flatly kill any man stupid enough to try striking it with bare hands. Many in Kumo called it the ultimate technique, and he could see why. The only solid weakness he could imagine it held for now was its raw chakra consumption. And A did not look like a man who would tire on that front any time soon. Even if he were, Kakashi was not confident enough in his ability to keep dodging forever. Like a static image, A's body flickered, and that was all the warning the Hokage had before he needed to leap away, the Raikage's lightning-covered body bolting forwards, tearing through the earth and surrounding buildings as he tore the world apart, headed straight for him. The thunderous crash as the man came to a stop coincided with Kakashi landing on a different rooftop. He shut his eyes tight against a cloud of ash and dust, squinting to try and keep an eye on his enemy. Only for A to suddenly be right on top of him. The Hokage's eyes widened, a split second before his head was ripped clean off his shoulders by a piercing, lightning-shrouded fist. The body vanished in a puff of smoke, replaced by a log covered in burning explosive tags. They went off and the crack of fire couldn't quite drown out the chirping of forking electricity. You can't run forever. The Raikage sneered, the clouds of dust slowly dissipating. The man was right. But neither could he fight that technique head-on. He needed a way around it. His dark eye coldly watched the Raikage as the man stalked forward, already having detected him. Was that a natural sense, or some other byproduct of the shroud armor? There was a force, like the wave of a tsunami that crashed over both of them, so powerful the lightning surrounding it flickered, followed immediately by a burning heat that nearly bowled Kakashi over before he snapped his gaze up to look where the force had come from. Like an open furnace, chakra glowed from several streets over, burning bright orange like a new sun cresting over the horizon. Akane, smoke began to rise thick and heavy, the sheer heat beginning to catch the wooden buildings. There was another pulse, and the Hokage saw the wisps of dark flame alongside the shimmering heat haze. It seems our Jinchuriki have found each other. A sneered. Stop squirming! Moegi's voice was harsh. The smoke and the screaming had forced it to lose its childlike nature and roughened it. A cut was above Moegi's brow, bleeding profusely. It made her shut one eye to keep the stinging clear as she used her hands to try and heal the gash that cut Hanabi from belly button to lower ribs. She'd been careless, tried to strike faster than her opponent, while he'd been distracted. Her Juken had ruptured his lung as his kunai slashed across her flesh. The Hyuga breathed harshly, keeping her Byakugan active. The Kyumo Nin were tearing through the village. The thin, reeling defensive Konoha ninja were barely able to put up a fight in any real sense. She could count on both hands the number of Kyumo Nin she'd seen definitively killed with fingers to spare. She'd seen more injured, but that was little consolation when the number of their own dead kept rising so fast the bodies were littering the streets and rooftops. Right now, what was happening could barely be called a fighting retreat. Occasionally Hanabi could spy some measure of resistance, a trap or a handful of umbu or jounin that could put up a fight or get a kill before they had to flee themselves or be overwhelmed, but beyond that the defenders were collapsing. They'd gotten separated from Undone in the chaos. She wondered if he was okay, or dying, or already dead. Moegi, Konohamaru and Hanabi themselves were hiding in the blasted-out remains of a butcher's shop, the smell of meat and blood masking their scent as much as the debris masked their presence. We have to try and find a way out, Konohamaru muttered. Won't be hard. Hanabi breathed as she felt the odd sensation of her wound knitting itself closed. They're passing over the civilians, ignoring them almost. They have targets. The thought suddenly occurred to her that, possibly, she might be one of those targets. Not she herself, of course, but any Hyuga female would certainly do given her sister's own history. Before the thought could move further, there was a sudden, all-consuming flare, so bright it made her scream and shut off her Byakugan in reflex. What's dash? The shockwave nearly knocked her friends over, the remains of the structure rattling around them, nearly knocked clean off its foundations. It was like being bowled over by a charging bull. After a moment, Hanabi gathered herself again and reactivated her Byakugan, wondering what on earth could be the cause of that brightness. The pain was sharp, nearly blinding. It was like staring into the heart of a sun. She looked, forcing her eyes to peer through the shroud of chakra before she felt her eyes go wide, the surprise nearly knocking the wind out of her. Akane? Together, almost uniform, she saw a whole contingent of the Kyumo forces turn from their attack and begin to converge on the raging inferno. No! We have HEY! Stop! Konohamaru's shout was lost on her as the princess of the Hyuga clan began running as fast as her legs could carry her. Yugigo sucked down a ragged, desperate breath of air. Sasami was clutched to her chest, the both of them hiding now, sheltered under the debris of a shattered building, a chunk of the slanted roof having fallen to the street, shorn off in the wake of the Nibi and Akane's fight. Sasami was crying, the young girl clutching at her chest, and Yugigo clutched her close as she forced herself to move, getting to her knees under the slanted roof and prying the girl loose to get a look at her. Sasami wailed and her little hands desperately reached for her, terrified at the sudden distance. It's all right! It's all right! She yelled back, trying to soothe the girl as she brushed a hand through the now tangled mass of her hair. Calm down! Calm down, kid, I'm right here. It took a minute of coaxing, but the girl's terrified screams died down, reduced to sniffles and choked whimpers that broke Yugigo's heart as the young princess tried desperately to clutch at the memory of her training and station. No 6-year-old should be trying to look composed after being nearly killed. The Umbu woman looked her over, hands brushing away the soot and the dust on her face as her eyes raked her up and down, searching for blood or any sign of injury. Are you hurt? The girl shook her head, lips thin and bloodless as she pressed them together, her chin quivering. There was a sound of a crash, the ruins rattling around the both of them, as there was a howl she could only guess had come from the two demon holders currently fighting just a few hundred feet away. Another crash, this one closer, wood breaking, Sasami yelped in fright and Yugigo lurched forward to clutch the girl again tightly to her chest, drawing a kunai as a shaft of light broke through the gloom from the new opening. Another Umbu jumped through the opening. She recognized the man, one of the last of the Hokage's guard. "Come!" he hissed. "The Jinchuriki is buying us time. We've got to move!" Yugigo scowled. The Jinchuriki has a name, she wanted to hiss. But now was not the time. Sasami's safety was the priority. She crouch-walked forward, carrying the girl who clutched at her before she could straighten a bit, reaching the man before he led her out of the collapse. Yujito snarled, growling in pain as the clawed fist, hot as molten metal, grabbed her by the face, overpowering her and smashing the back of her skull into the cobblestone streets. Her skin burned, the smell of cooked flesh overpowering her senses as the Nibi tried to heal the damage. She drew a kunai, two of them, plunging the daggers into the forearm and the bend of the inner elbow and yanking harshly. The grip vanished with a snarl, and Yujito avoided a claw swipe that would have raked over her eyes before ghost fire burst from her lips and spewed over the burning Konoha girl's face. Her flames were not like the fires of the Yambi, and the Jinchuriki screamed as she reeled, batting aside the ephemeral flames that scorched her eyes. More flames surged onto Yujito's form. She was not a fully realized Jinchuriki, not like B, not like this girl, but she and the Nibi were close enough, and her experience far outmatched this girl child. She wouldn't lose to this upstart, no matter how synchronized with the Yambi she was. Yujito rushed forward. But immediately, her forward lunge was checked. Her fist, wreathed in ghost fire, cracked harshly against the girl's own clenched fist even though her eyes were still shut, matching Yujito's movements. The Yambi. Her body was moving under a will that was not entirely her own. She'd seen it from B enough to recognize the signs. Fist crashed against fist, and the girl's sheer, impossible strength sent force and pain rattling up her arm, as though she just smashed her fist into a steel wall. The girl swung a haymaker blow that would have taken her head off, but Yujito was faster, leaning back to avoid the strike as she struck with a high kick, veil fire streaming in the path of her leg. But again the girl moved warned or controlled. She avoided the blow as her eyes blinked back open, struggling to regain her focus and her sight. Yujito pressed her advantage while she could, claws, knees, kicks and strikes lashing out, with the added power of ghost-wreathed flames. The girl's defenses tightened, tucking her arms in close, absorbing blows that could have flattened men twice her size with little more than grit teeth, as she rapidly regained her sight. "Careful, kitten." She heard the Nibi purr at the back of her mind. "It's not just my little brother at work here." She pushed the thoughts aside, aware of the warning but incapable of engaging it fully as she focused, ducking under another punch. This time Yujito felt a shockwave of concussive force nearly knock her off balance, a blast of fire bursting out of the girl-child's fist. Dipping low, under her guard and behind her, Yujito swept the girl's legs out from under her, hooking one arm into her shoulder before tossing her with all her strength into a nearby building. Even before smashing through the walls, she could see the young Jinchuriki regain her bearings. Righting herself, she smashed through feet first and a second later was lunging straight for her again, the dust and debris barely having the chance to settle. The Yambi Jinchuriki twisted, curling in mid-air before her leg came crashing down onto the earth. The force of the blow made the Yujito's jaw drop open in shock, earth and rock splitting open, fire bursting out of the ground as she lost her footing and stumbled. Caught off guard and off balance, she could do little but try to brace herself as the girl rushed in, her fist cocked back and brimming with an overflow of burning chakra. The blow that smashed into Yujito's stomach was by far the hardest she's ever taken. Not even B in her full-powered state could match the devastating force. She felt her organs and bones rupture and break along her insides, barely having the presence of mind to hold her arms up to try and block the follow-up strike that would have likely killed her instantly if it struck her head full on. She was sent crashing into the ground, her body carving a trench into the earth, the Nibi frantically attempting to repair the damage inflicted as Yujito struggled to keep herself conscious through the pain and what should have been otherwise fatal damage. The Nibi worked quickly, now unfurling her full, deathly power. Yujito's body was wreathed head to toe in flames, the twin tails of the Nico bursting from the space of her tailbone as she struggled to her feet on shaking legs. The girl-child gave her no respite. Before she'd even reached her feet, the burning beast was there, striking with 2 quick jabs. Yujito backed away, barely avoiding the first, and was about to avoid the second when fire burst out of her clenched fist. A flash burned, searing the Jinchuriki's eyes with a scream of pain. She felt the Nibi take hold of her chakra coils and did not fight it, physically reeling. The chakra shroud lashed out tails and claws, thrashing and striking to give her some reprieve. Coughing blood and bile, she brought all the raw chakra she could mold in an instant to bear, channeling it through her hands. Flames burst from her fingertips as she thrust her hands forward, blasting the Yambi Jinchuriki with a column of fire at point-blank range. She felt the Yambi resist with its own monstrous power, a shield to Yujito's sword as the Konoha girl struggled to push through the violet flames even as Yujito backed away and the girl's feet dug divots into the stone roads, trying to resist being forced back. After a moment, the Nibi's power waned and failed. Her bijou was not one for raw strength like the Hachibi. But the reprieve was enough as she felt the worst of the pain beginning to fade from her insides and the weakness in her limbs recede, if only just. The instant the force diminished, she felt the Yambi brute force its way through, the girl's face a rictus of fury, snarling with eyes that burned like fire pits. Suddenly, smoke rose from the ground, thick and black. Yujito's eyes darted around them, noticing the many Kumogakurambu surrounding them, holding just outside the heat envelope that surrounded the Yambi Jinchuriki like a living kiln, enveloping the both of them. Her eyes glinted in the gloom as she pulled back into the blackened shadows now. Where the battle between the Jinchuriki was akin to two mountains crashing into each other, the battle between the Kage was altogether different. A serpent evading a lion. A tore through the village, the lightning shroud armor tearing apart anything that came close, doggedly chasing the retreating Kakashi with furious determination. Further and further away the Hokage drew the wreckage from the battle between the Jinchuriki, further from them and Sasami, deeper into the village. The flames were truly spreading now, black smoke rising to hang thick in the air, the fires he himself had lit as a stalling tactic, and now those bursting to life as the heat of Akane's transformed state made the dry wood catch like a wick. The flames provided their own form of cover, but it was a double-edged sword to be sure. It was narrowing his escapes, his means of keeping distance. He couldn't disengage completely, or A would take the opportunity to circle back towards Akane, and Kakashi was well aware she could not fight the wreckage with any hope of success. She was raw power, A needed a different weapon to bring him down, if it were possible at all. Finally, as they drew near the city center, the bloody wolf turned to face the lion. A's approach wasn't any more subtle than it had been, tearing through the city straight for him. Kakashi's hands moved, flashing in signs before he stomped one foot onto the ground, the earth erupting beneath his feet like a wall of spears jutting out in defiance of the wreckage. Stone cracked and splintered, turning to little more than pebbles, barely slowing down the lightning wielder. Kakashi rushed him, climbing the still intact stone spears to leap over the man. A tried to lunge for him, but couldn't reach, leaping from ground level as he was. The lightning armor tore through any kind of foothold before he could even reach it, stone, wood or otherwise. Kakashi twisted his body overhead, lashing out with both arms a fan of kunai blades, the small knives fanning outwards in a perfect semicircle, digging deep into wood, brick, mortar and stone wherever they struck. The flutter of seals snapping through the air was drowned out in the comparative cacophony of fire and lightning. The seals glowed, the runes shining before A's monstrous lightning shroud was suddenly diminished, reduced to little more than a faint shimmering aura around his body. The wreckage frowned, staring at his hands in irritation as his mind caught up quickly with the trap before Kakashi was on him. A was a mountain of pure muscle, and Kakashi knew better than to expect the man relied solely on his lightning shroud armor. His mastery over taijutsu was legendary. Even so, it was more than a little dismaying that the strongest axe kick delivered as he descended from the sky was blocked with barely a flinch of discomfort at all from the man, the crack of armored shin guard meeting his forearm thundering through the village street. A shoved him off, and with a handstand to catch his fall and get to his feet, Kakashi drew a kunai as the wreckage went on the offensive, uncaring as to the state of his lightning armor. A's moves were quick and powerful, relying on fists and heavy blows. Kakashi's arms came up, blocking the strikes, and quickly bringing his own limbs close to better absorb the massive impacts. The moment he sensed his opening, he took it. A's knee came up, ready to drive into his stomach when Kakashi's own limb caught the strike. Driving the bone of his kneecap into the soft cartilage between knee and shin, he drove forward with all his force, knocking the wreckage off balance if only for a moment, before delivering a rapid series of blows. Off balance, a still blocked each and every strike, the wreckage's eyes never leaving his as his fists and forearms cracked against Kakashi's armored gloves and bracers. A's hands thrust forward suddenly, both fists crashing into Kakashi's chest and stomach, driving the man back with a sputtering cough. In the next instant, A drove his foot into the ground, the wall erupting behind the Hokage, making him smack solidly against its surface, trapped between it and the advancing A. Without hand seals and barely with enough breath in his lungs to make the technique work, Kakashi breathed a plume of fire at Ei's face. The thin veil of lightning still covering the man made the pitiful gout of flame break like water on rock, but it obstructed Ei's vision enough for Kakashi to duck aside the heavy blow that would have caved in his skull. Now, almost beside the man, Kakashi stepped into Ei's guard, one foot hooking onto the massive man's own before he shoved. I didn't budge an inch. With a roar, the Reikage pulled back his extended fist and drove the bone of his elbow into Kakashi's ribs, or tried to, as the Hokage barely caught the blow with his one free hand. Gripping as tightly as he could with chakra, Kakashi drew a kunai with his free hand, the blade crackling with lightning, and drove it tip down into Ei's shoulder through the lightning veil. The Reikage didn't so much scream as he simply roared. Then the heel of his boot crashed down onto Kakashi's foot. The snap of bone was instantly painful, and the loss of focus made Kakashi lose his grip on the Reikage as a fully rounded on him, driving forward with a fist caught him full in the jaw. Through the blood pounding across his skull and the ringing in his ears as he hit the ground, Kakashi heard a pull the knife from his shoulder, and shoved himself forward to roll back onto his feet, rounding on the man as he ignored the pain in his now broken foot. I gripped the knife tight, and then with a throw that could have thrown that blade clear across the Hokage monument, Ei tossed it. With the sound of steel shattering, one of the kunai seals around the two men broke, and with the sound of the sky splitting open, Ei was again shrouded in his lightning armor. Akane snarled, feeling the slash of claws rake across her shoulder and back, the pale flames of the nibi eating away at her flesh in a cold burn that seared her skin. She turned, lashing out with a swipe of her hand, but it was little use. The Kumo Kunoichi was already slipping back into the unnatural smoke. When her eyes were injured, Goku could still sense her, still see. This was different. The smoke wasn't real, it was chakra, enveloping the whole area in foreign presences. It was like trying to spot an individual raindrop while under a waterfall. She tried to blast away the darkness before, the power of her explosion enough to knock down buildings, but doing little to dissipate the unnatural dark. The Umbu circled, keeping their distance, staying beyond her reach to retaliate but giving their Jinchuriki support. She moved to take on a defensive stance, but before she even could, 3 more strikes tore across her arms, stomach and thighs. Blood audibly dripped in rivulets onto the cobblestones at her feet, and she felt Goku's snarl in her own mind reflected as it emerged from her throat. They were losing this fight. She sensed it a moment before it struck, the flare of chakra to the side, and though she tried to move, it was too late. A claw of pure chakra, wreathed in fire, lunged out of the dark, coiling around her throat, the sharp nails digging into her skin as Goku tried to keep the worst of the power from burning her neck to cinders. The claw pulled and she was ripped off her feet, smashed face first into the stone, dragged across the bare rock. She felt the grit tearing at skin that rapidly reknit itself, rock and dirt digging into the torn flesh of her face and arms. She was lifted into the air, smashed back down, dragged again, the streets and walls of the village repainted with her blood before the woman finally threw her down the length of the street. Akane's body shook, nearly failing as she tried to get to her feet, fat globules of blood dripping from her chin as her torn-up face stitched itself back together. She let out a cough, wet. A breath, also wet. Goku-chan, she wheezed, clutching at her chest as her thoughts sluggishly moved through her mind. I need help. I am helping, girl, he said, not unkindly. A few more years, and we would have beaten my sister into the dirt, her and her friends. There was a sharp flare of pain, a slice at the back of her knee that made her fall again. The kick that subsequently cracked into her temple drove her further off balance, nearly knocking her flat all over again. Goku snarled in her mind. If she could just get rid of this damned smoke. She shut her eyes, channeling chakra to her ears in desperation, but the crackle of flames, the screaming of people, the muttered curses, everything came to her, not just the sounds she needed, overwhelming and disorienting. She heard the rushing sound of footsteps to her right, a shout, her eyes snapped open, whirling on the sound, face twisting into a snarl as her fiery hair flared behind her. The spinning whirl of chakra was wholly unexpected. Kaiten! The scream shocked her, and the spinning bubble burst apart in every direction. Like a stone thrown into water, the smoke was forcefully parted, the Hyuda's chakra disruption extending to the unnatural cloud around her. One moment she was staring at the whirling chakra, a blink, and in the next she was staring at Hanabi, her friend's skin rapidly blistering, red and burned, braving the ambient heat that had already put the nearby buildings to the flame. The Hyuga girl's eyes were shut tight, leaking tears as she whimpered and cried, curling in on herself, and Akane's instinct was to go to her, recede back the fiery fury of Goku to help her friend. But Goku's own voice arrested the thought. His shout came with urgency. Left! She turned. There she was. Hanabi had been waiting for a moment when the woman couldn't retreat, couldn't slip away until the smoke was enforced around her again. She was fully committed, a claw swipe that would tear out Akane's throat. This was her chance, likely her only chance. She moved, not risking an avoidance. She stepped into the strike. Claws sank into her upper arm, pale flames burned coldly under her skin. Her strength was rapidly failing as muscle, tendon and sinew burned away, but she had enough strength to bring the remains of that arm up and grab a bone-breaking hold on the Jinchuriki's forearm. The bones ground and splintered, but she couldn't afford to enjoy the moment as she reared back with her free hand. The blow was telegraphed, sloppy. The Nibi had enough time to raise a hasty defense. Akane and Goku didn't care. All of her strength, every bit of raw power she could shove into the blow was driven into her arm. The instinctive power Goku had infused her body with in likeness to her mother's own legendary strength surged into every single muscle fiber as she screamed and punched. The Kumo girl's arm snapped like a dry twig and her fist kept going through the defense to smash straight into her upper chest. She'd been aiming for her head, but the woman had enough time and reflexes to try and dodge. Bones broke, she felt it, collarbone, ribs, sternum. Her fellow Jinchuriki's chest all but caved in, and the wide-eyed shock and horror was made all the more terrible when the blood she coughed spattered over Akane's face. She was catapulted back, both arms broken, hitting the ground like a flopping dead fish, the bones of her body crunching and rolling within the sack of meat that was her skin. She rolled to a stop, a bloody trail left where her body had skipped over the cobblestones. She didn't move again. Sasami kept her eyes tightly shut, face pressed into Yugogo-san's chest, hands clutching so tightly at her vest her fingers hurt. Ladies, do not cry. Every shake, every sound, the heat of crackling flames, every wayward scream carried on the wind made the girl jump. Yugogo and the other man moved fast, the purple-haired woman that had been taking care of her for months rushing through the half-destroyed village as the flames continued to rise around them. The heat was stifling, the smoke a choking grip on her throat. She stuffed her face into Yugogo's shoulder, smelling the faint traces of her lavender soap beneath the smoke. Then something hit her. The shock of the impact rattled her insides, her whole world jerking. She tried to clutch tightly onto Yugogo, but her grip was ripped away, her whole body tumbling through the air until she couldn't tell where the ground ended and the sky began before she slammed into the hard, unyielding ground. She felt her arm scrape against the stone, the rough rock tearing at it. She screamed in pain and then bit at her bottom lip, cradling her arm tight as she curled into a ball and tried to smother her tears. Ladies, do not cry. There were sounds nearby, sounds of fighting. She brought her eyes up to see Yugogo and the other Umbu fighting people, 4 of them. It was fast, too fast for her to keep up. The Hokage's guard killed a man before he himself was killed, his throat slash, gurgling on bright red blood that spattered as it hit the ground. But his arms wrapped around his killer, holding him tight, and Yugogo took the opportunity to step close, driving 3 quick stabs into the man's unprotected side. Sasami watched, heart in her throat, as her guardian was grabbed from behind, the Kumo nin wrapping one arm around her throat, the other grasping the arm holding her kunai. The second man rushed into attack. Her foot drove into his chest, shoving him back and herself into the man holding her, sending his back smashing into a wooden wall with enough force to splinter it. Still he held her. Yugogo snarled, scratching at the armored arm around her neck like a beast, eyes alight with fury as her nails splintered and cracked, fingers beginning to bleed. Sasami stared, tears percolating in her eyes that she refused to let fall, praying in stiff, frozen terror somewhere in her mind. Then someone grabbed her. The grip was painful. A crushing thing at the back of her neck, she screamed, long and loud, legs kicking as she was pulled off the ground. Got why? The burning hot liquid poured over her head and the grip was gone. She fell onto her knees, scraping them and her hands, the pain lost on her as the man collapsed. A kunai blade driven into the hilt at the side of his neck before Sasami's eyes snapped over to Yujito, now unarmed, and struggling to breathe as the man behind her released the arm that no longer held a weapon to put all the strength he could into his hold. His partner got to his feet, weapon at the ready. When he drove his blade forward there was nothing to stop it but bare flesh. So that's what she used. The knife was stabbed straight through Yugogo's hand, its diamond-shaped tip bursting out the other end alongside gristle and bone. Still her fingers clenched tight, grabbing as firm a hold as she could before yanking blade free from a grip soaked with blood. Then she drove the back of her fist into the skull of the man behind her. It wasn't clean, it wasn't instant, The shock of pain made the man slacken his grip. Unsure how he was under attack, she sucked down a breath, eyes regaining their fury before she punched again, and this time rather than a cut on skin, the knife bit into skull, the umbu mask shattering as the Kumo Nin shoved her away in a panic straight into the waiting blade held by his friend. The knife sank into Yugogo's stomach, blood bursting from her skin like a sliced water sack. Her eyes went wide, the air driven from her lungs as the strength started rapidly leaving her body. Sasami screamed, but still, ladies don't cry. The umbu gripped at the hand still pierced by the kunai, keeping it from being used any further as a weapon as he used the other to force the knife to cut her open even further. She reached at her hair, pulling free the thick, heavy shard of shattered mask in her free hand before swinging wildly. She hit collarbone first, the jagged edge biting into her hand and into flesh, pulled it free, hammering again, closer this time, the chest. He let go of the knife, let go of her arm, panicked now, trying to defend. Too late. The third hit found her target, hammering the shard of mask in the exposed opening beneath his, onto his neck. Bright red blood fountained from the wound as she ripped his throat open. He gurgled, trashing horribly as he hit the ground before going still. Her eyes swam, ashen face nearly slack before she collapsed onto the stone. Sasami wasn't sure how long she stood there, staring in numb, shocked horror at the sight of her guardian, laying on the floor. The flames crackled around them, the smoke casting long, dark shadows even in the midday sun, the sweltering heat trapping her eyes in a haze, along with her mind. She didn't notice the tears spilling from her eyes until she saw Yugogo's body twitch, struggling to move. She cried, screaming something she couldn't even hear as she ran forward, little feet pounding across the stones to reach the woman whose arms shook with the effort of even lifting her chest off the road, but caught Sasami in a firm grip, hugging her tight. Sure, you're okay, you're okay. Her voice was soft, faint. She lowered the both of them to the ground, curling her body as much as she could around the fire princess, the blood pooling around the both of them. With a tremendous crash of shattered masonry and brick, Kakashi's body was sent straight through the outer walls of the hospital. People screamed. What few nurses and hospital staff remained right alongside their panicking patients. His armor was cracked, clothes torn. Numbing techniques were keeping him moving, but he could feel the bones of his foot grinding and digging along his insides, the bruise along nearly broken ribs that made breathing difficult. He would be paying for the constant movement the second this fight was over, might even lose the foot entirely, but better that than dead. Stepping through the hole, he looked little worse for wear than he had been, his only injury still the kunai that had dug into the juncture between shoulder and collarbone. That arm was slower, weaker, but that was hardly a weakness when Kakashi couldn't get past that lightning shroud armor. Not yet, at least. His eyes darted a split second to the door at A's immediate right, the room number displayed. Third floor. His eye darted back to the wreckage, smiling at the man. Aren't you tired yet? Must be exhausting keeping that up. The dark-skinned man rolled his shoulder. I can rest after you're dead, Hokage. A lunged forward, the lightning shroud noticeably smaller than the colossal monolith that had been tearing apart the village streets and buildings, barely hovering more than a few inches around his skin. Was he tiring? Or simply doing it so the building wouldn't collapse around them? Perhaps there was a limit to how much tonnage the shroud could destroy at once and wouldn't keep him from getting crushed if 10 stories of concrete and steel fell on him. Either way, Kakashi had neither the time nor the luxury to care. He skirted to the side, his back pressed against the hallway wall, leaping away as his hands formed seals, pulling the water from the nearby pipes and faucets, sending lances of the liquid straight towards the living lightning rod. The armor sparked, spat, and jumped. Forks of lightning crackled and split across the hallway, but he didn't look at all impressed, snarling as he stalked forward. Really? This was your plan? You thought such an obvious thing would work? The disgust in the man's voice was a weapon in and of itself. What I wouldn't give to have fought Hiruzen, rather than this pale shadow sitting in his office. Kakashi didn't answer, hands heaving downwards as if pulling a massive weight, the water surging from the floors above tore down the ceiling. He heard more screams, saw more than one person fall to the hall between them or behind A, injured or dead. He couldn't spare a thought for them now. The concrete, like everything else thrown at the wreckage, broke apart on contact with the shroud, becoming little more than flecks of dust that coated the man, turning his dark skin into an ashen gray. Oddly enough, A looked as infuriated as Kakashi felt. Leaping up onto the walls, Kakashi began to climb. Bastard! Unmoved, and Kakashi spared a quick look behind him, seeing that the man had in fact, by necessity, diminished the raw output of his shroud even further to avoid destroying the walls themselves, allowing him to climb. With a blindingly fast pivot, the Hokage turned and rushed towards his enemy, the sound of 1,000 birds filling the air as both his hands lit up with the lightning of the Raikiri. A's eyes widened, jerking to the side to avoid being impaled by the lightning that could now pierce the thin remnants of his shroud, his knee shooting up to hit Kakashi's midriff, but at the angle that they were, standing directly on the wall, with Kakashi above and he below, gravity worked against him, and the angle was off, his brain still not having fully adjusted to the sudden change in perspective. The blow winded him a bit, but it didn't hurt him. Kakashi pressed the attack. He focused on his hands, both of them still screaming with the deafening noise of the Raikiri, hammering A's upper body defenses with all the force and speed he could bring to the fight, watching as the man's muscles jerked and jumped where the foreign lightning made contact. His shroud was enough to stop the ninjutsu from shredding through his skin and body outright, but the increased output, concentrated on Kakashi's fists, as opposed to A's whole body, was breaking through the defense. A's movements became less precise, more unsure, muscles jumping and twitching, minute changes that affected his defense badly, and Kakashi pressed the moment for all it was worth, not allowing him the time to retreat and get to more favorable ground. His hand whipped out, snake fast, shoving through a block that was just off its mark. His fingers latched onto A's collarbone, thumb pressing over the kunai wound. Then he forced his finger to dig in and the chidori in his hand to go with it. A's entire body seized, bolts of lightning tearing through his insides as the man screamed, his lightning shroud shutting off like a bursting light bulb. His face, a rictus of absolute fury, snapped towards Kakashi, and before the Hokage could do much more than widen his eyes in surprise that the man was still breathing, let alone moving, he charged forward, delivering a tremendous headbutt that sent a sickening crack across Kakashi's face. Nose. He belatedly realized. Reeling, he couldn't do much more than gasp as A grabbed him by collar and throat with both hands before throwing him over his shoulder and sending them both straight down to the 3rd floor where they'd started. He hit the ground and felt something break along his insides, a flare of pain burning across his chest as he brought his arms up to block the hammer-like punches that rained down from above as A seemed determined to cave in his skull. Every blow felt like it would shatter his forearms. A was strong. Stronger than Guy, and that was saying something. He couldn't fight him like this. A's fist hammered and hammered and hammered, it felt endless, and the instant Kakashi spied the man pulling one fist back a bit farther than he should have, he took the opportunity, drawing 2 finger knives from his vambrace and slashing A across the ribs and exposed bicep. The fight was brutal, ugly, like animals fighting with claws and teeth than ninja dueling with technique. He pulled away suddenly, gathering enough concentration to sink through the floor itself. Another finger broken and his forearm white-hot from what must have been a hairline fracture. He had a second's respite before A smashed through the ceiling, bleeding from a half-dozen new wounds as the lightning shroud sparked and spat, trying to form itself again. Kakashi's hands smacked down onto the ground. Doton! They were on the 2nd floor, too high to use the earth itself, but concrete would suffice. It jutted out like fine white rock spears around the rakeage, the hallway suddenly turning into a jagged row of concrete teeth. Unmoved, the fine chakra control needed for the lightning shroud was gone, but he was no less fast. The Hokage backed away as fast as he could. It was a taijutsu monster. Facing him head-on was something best left to Guy, and even then, he wasn't sure if his friend could actually beat the Raikage in that fight. He fired off technique after technique, keeping his distance. Fire, lightning, water, even a handful of the wind abilities he knew. A was relentless. When Kakashi fired, the man dodged. When he couldn't dodge, he intercepted with a technique of his own, or furniture, medical equipment, sometimes just ignoring anything that couldn't stop a rampaging bull and just barreling straight through it. Finally, in desperation, the Hokage's hands once more struck the ground. Kuchios! The clouds burst along the hallway and a half-dozen hounds the size of wolves and small horses burst outwards, charging forward with snarls on their lips and spittle flying from their bared fangs. The first beast to reach the Raikage was promptly dispelled, the man catching it by its throat and jaw before twisting with a sickening crunch. The second fared little better, with A ramming his monstrous fist down the beast's throat, breaking teeth, jaw and everything in its path before the beast vanished. The third slammed into him, biting into his thigh. He raised his fist, but the fourth came in, biting at his forearm, then the fifth at his shoulder and the sixth the leg. Kakashi fired off a lightning spear, thin, fast, and aimed squarely at the bound A's heart. The Raikage heaved, lifting the dog on his forearm and maneuvering the other on his shoulder into the path of the attack. Both were dispelled with twin yelps of pain. much less encumbered to grab the two beasts on his thigh and ankle by the scruff of their necks. The one in his right arm, he tightened his fist until something crunched, the other he threw into and through the opposite wall. The two men stared at one another, panting harshly. Kakashi was nearing his limit, pain and injuries catching up, and despite the sheer strength in him he could tell it was similarly affected, blood dripping from the man in rivulets from the multitude of fresh cuts and punctures. Seemed to shake off his exhaustion, shedding it like a snake would shed its skin as he began to stalk forward again, and Kakashi had to grit his teeth, wondering if his rival was just made from bloody granite. Then, suddenly the sound of a horn cut through the chaos. Kakashi didn't recognize the sound. Stopped, eyes widening just a bit as his head turned. The sound came again, 3 times, loud and rolling. Grit his teeth, turning and glaring, and Kakashi suddenly realized what that was. A call for retreat. The sound came again. With a roar, he turned, smashing his fist through a wall before he vanished in a puff of smoke. Kakashi sagged where he knelt, wondering what the hell had just happened. After a moment, he could hear a strange hissing around him, glancing up to peer out a window to try and see what was happening. Sand? The place Tsunade and Orochimaru found themselves in towards the end of this winding, dark, flooded road. Either of them could only describe it as a heart. Seemingly every stream from every corner of the great corpse of a city above them came down here. Water made the walls sheen. Only the faintest shaft of light reached the floor, glimmering across the rippling waters like starlight. At the center of it all, a tree. Tall, gnarled, and withered. It was bone white, as dead as the city that fed it, its roots digging deep into the crags and rocky crevices. At the foot of the tree they saw them both. Conan, curled onto her side, her head resting on the man's lap, still wounded, the blood from her wounds glimmering like rubies thrown across diamonds as water, white bark, gray stone, and pale sunlight played tricks on the eye. She was pale, eyes closed, features pinched in troubled sleep. The man, if he could be called such, was a thin, skeletal thing. His body was starved. Wry lines of muscle stood out along his arms, but that seemed the barest hint of flesh on him beneath the skin. Hollowed cheeks, sunken eyes. The shock of red hair was the only thing that seemed to be well kept within him. His body had atrophied, it seemed, half fused with the bark of the tree, sitting at the center of this place. Tsunade stepped forward, Orochimaru beside her. Neither of them knew who this man was, but standing here, so close they could feel the raw power rolling off of his broken body in waves. His chakra was like a blanket, covering the whole of this place. Like roots, digging deep into the earth, spreading like tendrils across the world, as far as they could fathom. Farther even. He was powerful, perhaps the power behind Conan's rise within Amigakure, the tool that kept her iron hold across the fractious AIM population. She his eyes, heirs, his enforcer. He the one guiding her. It would make sense. He needed to die, as much as she did. Both Sanin stopped cold, however drawn up short as their keen eyes behold something slightly behind the man amidst the ruins. A gravestone, unmarked and unremarkable, save for the familiar horned Hittite and the bound scroll resting beside it. Preserved, enshrined. The man's eyes rose. Once more, the waters around them churned and rippled, and the eyes that fixed themselves upon them were ageless and sundering. Welcome. Chapter 86. When Fukuro landed, it was on his feet, his bones creaking within his limbs at the abuse. Damn body. Useless old thing. Fukuro brought his eyes up to his attacker, green, bowl-cut hair. The green beast, no. Too young, an apprentice or protege of some kind. Maybe a son. The young man, whatever he was, stared at him severely, teeth grit behind closed lips, the muscles of his jaw bunched. The boy was angry. Good. It would make him sloppy. You hurt Tenten, he said as if that should mean something. I am Rock Lee. I will be your opponent. Fukuro snorted, unimpressed as he slowly brought his blade to a more ready stance. Your funeral, boy. The young man rushed forward. He was fast, his form near flawless, taijutsu master then, confident enough to try matching him at close range without drawing a weapon of his own. His foot lashed out with a kick and Fukuro slashed at the approaching leg with his blade, but the boy pivoted, redirecting the kick so his orange shin guard smashed harshly against the edge instead. The steel bit but didn't cut through. The force of the kick and the sheer power and weight behind it put the old mercenary on the back foot. The tip of his massively long saber dug into the ground where he let it go, dipping low under the boy's kick to emerge behind him, drawing a knife to slash at his exposed ribs. but the boy was fast still, and had enough of a sixth sense to already have his hand in place when he turned, forearm striking forearm as he shunted his thrust to the side and in that same spinning movement lashed out with his foot to kick Fukuro's sword out of reach with a clatter of steel. The old mercenary smirked. The boy was good. The blade spun in the air, its edge digging into a tree meters away as the boy stepped forward, into Fukuro's guard and exploded into a rush of flying fists, knees and elbows. Fukuro tried to retreat, but the boy was on him, never letting up, never relenting, not providing an inch of room. Was it his natural fighting style of choice? Or had he already dissected that the more room he allowed the greater the chance the wily old owl had to arm himself with a trick or two to turn the fight? Didn't matter much in the end. His blows hit hard, his fists like iron weights, his elbows like pointed hammers, and his speed was superb. But still he was young. And the young were stupid fighters. They relied too much on bodies that hadn't yet failed them. Fukuro took the blows, dodging where he could afford it, absorbing the strikes where he couldn't. He noticed when the boy let his guard down slightly, ever so slightly. After all, why be on guard with an old man that could barely keep up? That's when he struck. He ducked, deftly slipping past a straight drive punch, stepping into the boy's guard, a powder bomb slipping into his hand. He shoved it forward, his other hand snapping out, a single chakra string latching onto his sword meters away. The bomb went off, the burst of fire and force burning his well-calloused hand. He barely felt it. He made the sound coincide with the crack of his blade being yanked free of the wood. He would give the boy this. He was fast and good. He hadn't avoided the blast, not completely, but enough to not be completely blinded. Only one eye was shut tight, slight burn singing that half of his face, the other still clear, the eye open and the boy furiously suppressing the pain in order to not leave himself exposed to the counter. Still, no doubt his ears were ringing too much to notice the skittering of a blade coming up behind him. The boy lashed out with a kick, one that was so fast and precise it slipped straight through Fukuro's guard, hitting him dead center of the chest, knocking the wind out of the old owl, forcing him back. No. His singed hand lashed out, grasping a tight hold onto the bandaging around one of Lee's forearm, pulling the fabric in a fistful, yanking the boy closer to him, keeping him in range. Lee's leg struck out again, hammering a solid blow into Fukuro's inner knee, and the elbow that followed it up as the old man nearly lost his footing would have taken his head clean off if he hadn't blocked it. Fukuro twisted the bandages in his hand, wrapping them tight around Lee's arm, tight enough to hurt, to bend the boy's arm enough for him to start twisting his body a bit to avoid the reflexive pain, leaving his chest open as Fukuro drove a knee up into the boy's sternum, smashing the air out of him. Lee coughed. But in the exchange Fukuro allowed his concentration to slip. With a glint of reflective sunlight, his blade twisted in the air, catching the bright midday sun. The boy was slightly deaf. But he wasn't blind. Lee twisted around with the force of a rampaging bull, fully tearing the bandages Fukuro had gripped him by, narrowly avoiding the blade that would have cut into his spine as the weapon slipped into Fukuro's hand. This time, it was the old man who stepped forward, driving into the attack as Lee was the one off balance. Even so, the boy ducked and weaved, dodged and spun on the rough, uneven ground like it was the flat mats of a dojo, sure-footed and skilled. When Lee looked like he would regain his balance and begin to counter-attack, Fukuro knew not to press, tossing an arc of black powder into the air. He swept his blade in the same arc, the mechanism hidden in the spine sparking to set the whole thing alight in a blinding flash. It nearly knocked the boy on his ass, and the old owl leapt away to catch his breath. He let out a low laugh as Lee rolled to his feet, slipping back into his guard seamlessly. This one was fun. Deidara was down in arm, his knees shook with every heavy step with weakness brought on by blood loss, his chakra reserves were all but exhausted. A pardon and a reward did him no good if he was dead. The problem was, the bitch that had cornered him was not letting him go. Like a dog clamping onto a bone, she hounded him through the trees, pursuing him with a tenacity that bordered on vindictive. Perhaps if he weren't injured he could escape. Hell, if he weren't injured he'd probably have blasted the up-jumped bitch to hell and back already. But he was injured, and she was hardly going to give him the chance to catch his breath, recover and find himself a new arm. He saw her then, moving like a ghost through the trees, long pink hair, a scarred eye glinting like a jade knife. She circled him like prey. Not today, he hissed. The mouth of his remaining hand chomped and chewed as he reached into his satchel of explosive clay. He didn't need a forest for cover. She did. When he threw out his hand, the rain of tiny explosives fell across the forest like cast pebbles, thrown in every direction. After a moment, everything went up in flames. The explosion hit him with the force of a hammer to the chest, knocking the wind out of him. Trees creaked as they collapsed. Try hiding in that. The fires burned out quick, leaving little more than a circle of burnt ruin, wide open space for him to see any attack coming. So she made it obvious. She stood in the charred field, stepping closer as though she didn't have a care in the world. Deidara grit his teeth at the insult. She thought him weak. Easy. He saw her smile beneath her mask. It took him longer than he cared to admit, but eventually, he pieced it together. With every exchange of blows, every moment they fought that went without the surge of chakra, even in minute spurts and small flares, he knew. You're the one. Fukuro laughed as he leaped away, gaining some distance. The girl's teammate. He smiled then, something wild and feral as his blade danced across his hands. The one that's just like me. The boy was breathing hard. He was faster, stronger than these withered old bones, but more than one trick had nearly killed him, set his strong heart racing in his chest. Sharp spikes of adrenaline could drain you once their effects began to wear off. He would still be fast, still be strong, but just that ever bit more sluggish, that bit less refined. It was the little things, stacked atop one another, that won battles like this. And Fukuro did indeed have every intention to win. Then he felt it, there at the edge of his senses, drawing closer, faster and faster. The boy's friends, or those well enough and strong enough to make a difference. They split off, each one going to a different fight and individual rescues. Stupid. Should have focused on one target, overwhelm it, and move on. Even so, it was little surprise who it was that came to help the boy, not with what he knew now. A rain of knives fell on him, and his blade sang with the sound of ringing steel as he deflected the deadly hail, while his boot cracked into the sole of the Lee boy's heel, meeting him kick for kick as they both sent each other backwards. The girl was there, weapons ready, falling into her familiar place behind her teammate. Fukuro couldn't help but laugh ruefully at the sight of them. Of course it would be her. Damn kids. Always needing crutches to walk. He looked at Lee. That one should know better. The old owl reached into his vest, pulling out a chakra storage scroll as the two rushed forward, falling into an attack pattern that seemed so practiced they barely needed to think about it. The scroll unfurled and he grasped the chakra within. It felt oily, thick. Sludge in his veins, tar between his bones. Foreign. Not his. Never his. He'd learned to shape it all the same. He slashed open his hand, the blood dancing over the seals folded into the metal of his blade and the hilt. With a burst of smoke, an owl, pale with feathers of smoke and ash, emerged at his side. Its talons and beak sharpened like blades, its eyes gleaming with intelligence as it rose high into the air. She tore through his puppets like a scythe through wheat. It was galling, infuriating, and though he would never admit it aloud, frightening. The Hyuga woman moved like living water, her body twisting and slipping seamlessly between row upon row of blades and thrown projectiles. Those damnable eyes were seeing every angle, every possible attack that would have normally seen other men dead 100 times over. Her blade sliced through wood and metal like paper, and where it didn't, her ghostly touch severed the chakra strings he used to control his puppets utterly, leaving them to flop uselessly to the floor before he re-exerted his hold over them again. But by then she'd slipped away, the danger past. Brute force did not work and was costing him more and more of his puppets, and so he pulled away, drew them all back and bombarded the Hyuga with long-range projectiles, hoping to overwhelm her through sheer volume. Graceless, artless, but it could work. Then she spun, and her chakra whirled around her like a battering wind, knocking the delicate Samban and sturdy Kanai aside like so much useless junk. Again and again she did this, and used the time to draw ever closer, inexorably, unfailingly, towards his true body. She could see him through the near 100 enemies arrayed before her. And she was coming straight for him. His long-range bombardment rendered useless, Sasori drove forward to attack again, his front-line puppets closing the distance with scything blades and reaping talons. He saw her suck down a deep breath. When she expelled it, it was a thick, black cloud of smoke that plumed from her lips, blanketing the entire forest. Soon, Sasori couldn't see anything. Then, as he felt a puppet be lost, then another and another, in less than a few seconds he realized that she, with those cursed eyes, still very much could. He sent his puppets scattering, all of them fleeing in every direction before he himself began to climb, rising high, higher still into the heights of the trees, to the point where he knew he was reaching the very tops and there'd be no room left to climb. Still the cloud did not abate, not even the barest hint of sunlight reached him. There was a sudden, violent wrenching, the flare of sensation that was not quite pain as the sound of rent metal and shattering wood reached his ears. He snapped his gaze downward, finding the Hyuga's iron-hard grip on his ankle, the sheer force of it damaging the tempered, hardened material as chakra swirled around her fist in buffeting, cleaving whirls, not dissimilar to the technique she'd used to batter aside his projectiles. Smoke leaked from between her teeth, white eyes glinting like a predator's in the gloom before she yanked him down towards her. Sasori's grip held firm, but the wood he was anchored to did not. With a rending crack of wood it gave, and he fell towards her. The blade in his forearm snapped forward, out of its compartment, and he struggled to recall the last time he needed to use it in such a way. Every single one of his puppets turned instantly to rush to his defense. She pushed off the tree, the two of them descending back to the forest as his blade caught against hers, the tempered steel holding up far better against her own. He pushed against her, shoving her blade aside. His physical strength in this body was greater than hers. Her free hand rushed forward, towards his heart, but he was ready, his own arm deftly intercepting, and he received a jolt through his entire body for his efforts, as her jukin sought to disrupt the flow of chakra from his last remaining flesh to this body that housed it. But she couldn't, not yet. The body was too unfamiliar, the connections too ingrained and alien to her knowledge. She would learn if given the opportunity. Blade cracked against blade in their descent, the sound the only thing to indicate where anything was in the blackened smoke, the sparks of the metal barely illuminating her face with its bulging veins and milky white eyes. The closest of his puppets arrived, launching a volley of poisonous senbon, and immediately she twisted in midair, her feet catching against something and stopping her descent instantly as Sasori twisted to get his own feet under him, unsure as to where anything else was or how far he even was from the ground. She vanished into the dark as he fell. An interminable moment later his feet smashed into the earth, and he immediately leapt away as a kunai with an explosive tag stuck itself into the dirt at his feet. He was nearly too slow to escape the blast, pelted by concussive force, heat, and dirt. Every remaining puppet surrounded him, a fortress of bodies that shot out of their limbs and tensors and fine lines of razor wire like feelers. He shut his eyes, they were useless anyway, feeling through the puppets and the thousands of tiny sensors. Trees, rocks, dirt, falling leaves, there immediately more of the puppets converged, moving, and he was rewarded with the clear sound of steel striking steel. He forced every puppet to rush forward, pressing the attack. He needed to keep eyes on her no matter how many puppets it cost him. "You're good, boy." The compliment was sincere. The girl was keeping him in the fight. It would have been over at least twice now, but she had his back. That was disappointing. But few had ever lasted long once Kammer was summoned. He brought his arm up, the ancient owl seeing the gesture in the gloom of smoke and ash before descending to rest on his forearm. "The bird's eyes are hungry, predatory. It's been a long time since we've hunted, hasn't it?" he mused. Kammer flared out his wings, flapping them once. Peering through the gloom, he saw them, wearing hastily made masks of their torn clothes to keep the ash from their lungs. The girl hovers around the boy, constantly disrupting the genjutsu Kammer was subtly trying to lay over them. Get the girl away from the boy. An easy fight from there. He couldn't defend against illusions, especially not subtle ones. The girl unfurled a scroll and weapons exploded like shrapnel in every direction as he calmly stepped back behind his tree, hearing the thunk of steel digging firmly into wood. "How satisfying was it, boy? When you realized you'd left all those who sneered and dismissed you staring at your back as you left them behind on the scales? Or when you killed the first man who by all rights should have beaten you handily?" His voice echoed through the woods, and it was the girl who caught on. "Don't focus on his words," she said. "He's trying to distract you. Listen for the source of the voice, not the echo." Clever girl. He thrust his arm up and Kimmer rose into the air with a beat of its wings, smoke and ash billowing outwards. He wasn't sure what was happening in the forest beyond them. The sounds were reaching, but it was chaotic, disjointed. No real way to tell who was winning or losing. So he focused on his own fight, his own objective. Everything else came later. One more go. There's a burning feeling across her flesh when she hears his footsteps. He's loud. It's on purpose. It has to be. He knows she can't run anymore. She has nowhere left to run to. It takes more effort than she's comfortable admitting to reach her feet. Kuratsuchi supposes she should be grateful. Sasori seems to have stabbed her with one of his slower poisons rather than a fast-acting one. She swallows to stop herself from coughing. Her grip on her blade is tight. Too tight. But it's all she can do to keep it from slipping from fingers that are far too numb. The Jinchuriki marches out of the forest like an implacable red boulder. His eyes are fixed on her, and she's fairly sure, even if she offered Naruto now, he would kill her anyway. Maybe for her betrayal. A part of her suspected that he'd just enjoy it. She blinks away the spots in her vision, forcing chakra to channel through her whole body, helping her focus, helping her feel, for now. Likely she was just speeding up the process. She doesn't bother trying to talk. Trying to stall for time. He's not stupid enough to fall for it, and frankly, she's not sure if her stalling would do more good for her or him. She's injured, with something burning through her insides that's gonna make her keel over soon enough. He's a Jinchuriki missing one arm, possibly tired from his previous fight with Naruto. She's had worse odds. He attacks first. She's faster, perhaps, more skilled. Her control over magma gave her the edge and raw power as she can catch him off balance. He's down one arm and her sword gives her reach. He's stronger, she knows. He'll outlast her as well, especially now with the poison in her veins. Hit him hard. As hard as she can. Put him down. Her sword whistles as it cuts through the air, like a songbird, and Han's gauntlet screeches as metal grinds against metal. He bats the blade aside, stepping forward into her guard. His arm is gone, so he drives forward with his knee, trying to crush it into her stomach. She steps to the side, the blow glancing off her ribs. Even so, the force is enough to drive the air from her lungs, and the elbow she cracks into his head to counter doesn't have nearly as much force as it could. His foot stamps down, between hers as he drives the stump of his shoulder forward, into her again, looking to knock her off balance. She takes a half step back, catching herself before she can trip, before raising her leg up to drive it down into his knee with all the force she can muster, chakra enhancing the blow. He barely budges, but she can see the pain like a pinprick in his eye as she shoves down even harder, her weight putting him off balance now, and the swing of her sword is lightning fast. Again his remaining arm is there, this time catching her blade by the edge itself, the sharpness biting deep into his palm, drawing blood. She pulls. I doesn't give an inch. His hand pivots at the wrist, and she can see he wants to snap Kuta's sword in two. He more than has the strength for it. She lets it go. The grip slips from her fingers and two kunai are in its place. She doesn't give him time to move, time to think. She strikes, both knives looking to punch through the weaker parts of his impossibly thick armor. Her blade is in his hand now, moving with deceptively easy dexterity, his grip slipping from mid-blade to the base, then from the base past the guard and into the grip itself. Seamlessly, easily. He's not stupid enough to let her steal it back. But he doesn't know all its tricks. A sword is a weapon. Every part of it. From tip to pommel, including the grip. He doesn't expect it. Not like he would have gripping the blade, so she hadn't done it then. She can do it now. The kunai in her hands slip and coil, lashing and scarring. He's stronger than her. But she's faster. He sees an opening. Something she leaves there. He strikes. Her blades are ready. One blocks the slash that would have cut her open with a ring of steel against steel. The other reaches forward, letting go of the knife and grabbing the sword firmly by the guard, her grip just above his. Her chakra feels sluggish, molding it is painful, it almost ruins the whole attack. Almost. Her chakra surges into the weapon, the blade, the pommel. The grip. Fires burst across the whole length and breadth of the sword, including the guard she holds in her hand. They're her flames. Born and fueled by her energy. They no more burn her than the lava she spews out of her throat does. The fires catch. Han grunts, letting go in reflex as she sends the flames dancing up his arm, spreading further, faster and faster. She'll burn the whole of him to cinders. Then, that same hand wreathed in fire lashes out. It catches her by the wrist. He's not looking to burn her. With a grinding, agonizing snap of bones crushed and ground against each other, Kuratsuchi hears herself scream as the bones of her wrist and forearm are ground down against each other. Slivers and splinters digging into the sinew and flesh beneath her skin and between the muscle. Her sword slips from now useless fingers. Han's grip is like iron, a vice getting tighter and tighter, pure hatred and spite forcing his grip ever tighter even as the flames blacken his arm into charred, stinking meat. Her other arm still holds the kunai. She stabs. Her free hand rises and falls, scratching against armor, punching between the folds of steel. She can feel it, see it cut and hack and saw through meat and bone. It feels like an eternity before he finally lets her go, cooked flesh and steaming blood hissing as he finally struggles to put out the flame. She stumbles, falls flat on her ass, cradling the ruin of her mangled arm to her chest as she fights down the tears through hissing, pain-filled breaths. She tries to recover, gathering her mind for combat once again. She opens her eyes and realizes the breathing techniques she's using to numb the pain are little more than a sick joke next to the rapidly regenerating flesh of Han's arm that she can see mending itself before her very eyes. The Jinchuriki stares her down, face impassive. He can afford to wait. She doesn't have that luxury. "You were never on my list," he says, a voice like metal and grinding stones. "But I suppose it's fitting you die at my hands too." Kuratsuchi feels her eyes snap open, what little breath she can suck down feeling as though it's coming through a straw. Kota's voice echoes through the cavernous silence of her mind. "Killed by traitors. Knowledge is power." If there had been one lesson Sakura had taken to heart above all others under Orochimaru-sensei, or any of her sensei, in this life or the other, it was that. Knowledge is power. She was not the fastest, or the strongest. She likely never would be. She didn't need to be. Because she knew more than nearly any other. More importantly, she knew how to apply that knowledge. Her skill set was in stealth. Ambushes. Laying traps. But traps weren't just physical things. Deidara of IWA was an infamous ninja. An infamous ninja had many advantages. Notoriety, reputation. But one disadvantage came with that. People knew you. They knew who they were fighting. What to expect. The explosive Kekiagenkai was almost pretty but useless knowledge. At best, it told her where to engage the infamous ninja. Close range. No. The true value came from something altogether more banal. Deidara was prideful, quick to hold a grudge. Quick to anger. Quick to take insult. It made him stupid. Predictable. And to be predictable, Orochimaru had also taught her, was to be dead. It was as the reports all said. It was easy to rile him up. A smile, a dismissal of the threat he posed, and the man was spitting in anger, nearly frothing at the mouth to see her reduced to a runny ass smeared across the dirt. When he targeted her with more explosions, she had her opening. She fled pretending to hide, to seek cover in more trees Deidara pursued. Not realizing his rage and his pride and the very noise and confusion brought on by his explosions let her slip the subtle genjutsu, like one would slip a noose around his neck. He chased after a ghost, exhausting himself as she slipped close and took some of his primed explosives, analyzed as best she could the way he molded his chakra to arm them and set them off. Risky. But there was a Jinchuriki to contend with nearby. In the end, she did not waste any more time once she felt she had what she needed. Exhausted, in pain, missing an arm and near delirious, blind with his anger and pride, perhaps in another life he would have lived up to the reputation he valued oh so highly. In this one, she slipped the knife across his throat and saw his eyes widen in surprise as he gurgled and clutched at his gaping neck, stumbling as he looked to her in naked surprise before falling over dead. She wiped the blood off her kunai before marching off. Lee had been in many fights, fought all kinds of enemies. The only battle comparable to this was one he'd fought in a desert. A rogue nuke Neen had nearly swallowed him and his team at the time in a sandstorm with a wind technique. This was like that but worse. The ash burned at his throat, made his breathing heavy. The smoke, stinking and cloying in the air, made his eyes water and his chest hitch as he coughed, his stance and strength compromised with each and every involuntary reflex. Tenten behind him was faring little better. Her neat buns were coming apart, strands of loose hair catching in the wind. He could hear her wheezing through her mask. They had to end this soon. The dash. Tenten's shout was cut short, a screech of metal against metal. It sparked and snapped, sending a flash of fire through the darkened gloom as Lee spun with a kick, the back of his armored boot joining Tenten's riposte to bat the weapon aside. But before he could do more than regain his footing, pain exploded across his face and eye. The owl's talons were razor-sharp, covered by the dark. It flew silent and fast, barely a whisper betraying its passage. Lee felt his whole face on fire, blood streaming down from his head to sting at his eye as he hissed. "Lee!" He heard more strikes, heard the desperation in Tenten's voice, the tinge of fear. Steel rang against steel, and he snapped his head upwards to see Fukuro pressing his attack on Tenten as she scrambled to match the older shinobi's kenjutsu. The flashes of metal meeting metal burst behind his eyelids, too fast and too bright by half, disorienting like a strobe, and he realized he was in the clutches of a genjutsu. He reached up, digging his own fingers into the tear at his face, the pain forcefully ejecting him from the manipulation before he struck hard and sure. The old man pivoted, dancing away, but Tenten was ready, tossing a kunai with pinpoint accuracy that caught the old owl in the bend of his elbow, between bicep and forearm. The man grunted, blood staining the silk fabric of his clothes. They charged. Then the owl flew above, flapping its wings and sending a column of smoke and ash into both their faces. When they could see again, he was gone. They moved without thought, automatic practice, standing back to back again. "You okay?" she dared to whisper. "Your eye." He tried to open his eye at her words. He could see nothing. He hoped his first instinct on it merely being the blood that made it sting and forced him to shut it was the reality. But now that the pain was becoming sharper, more localized to the damage, well, no use thinking about that now. He offered her a smile, though she couldn't see past his cloth mask. "I'll be all right, Tenchan." There's a laugh, deep and hollow, bouncing through the trees. "You're like me, boy, but also not." The wind picks up, kicking more ash into his face, and he has to shut his one remaining eye. He hears the flap of wings. Above, he turns, pushing Tenten away as hard as he can before snapping his gaze upwards. As he peers into the gloom and sees the massive bird above him, a fleeting thought crosses his mind, staring into those luminous predator eyes. The owl flies silent. The sharp, stabbing agony that blooms across his back drives the air from his lungs. Every muscle turns stiff, and he barely hears Tenten scream his name. He forces himself to look, to see. The blade juts out of his stomach, bright red blood dripping from a blade too thick by half. His breath is a sharp lance of pain under his ribs, and he barely feels the cut on his fingers as he reaches down and squeezes the weapon on reflex. There's another pain, another sharp agony across the back of his knee, and then he's kicked forward, off the blade. The strength in his legs give as he pitches and falls flat on the forest floor. His hand trembles, clutching at the wound, and his leg refuses to move, the tendon at the back of his knee's been cut. His vision swims, bile rises in his throat like acid, and his worry and despair magnify 100-fold when Tenten moves to rush over but stops, her weapons held at the ready. The old man looms over him, his mere presence a weight across his back. "Get away from him!" Tenten hisses. There's fear in her eyes now, fear for him. Lee tries to control his breathing. Fukuro laughs, chuckling low as the owl descends to rest at his shoulder. Fukuro kneels beside him, and Lee realizes the old man is talking to him, ignoring her. "Taijutsu, heh?" His laugh is nearly a scoff, dismissive. "People like you and me, boy, we need our own bag of tricks. Our own ways to bridge the gap. Just taijutsu. I'm surprised you lasted this long." The old owl shook his head. "Your sensei should have taught you better." Lee's breathing stills, his skin grows red and starts to steam. "He did!" The old man has just enough time to widen his eyes in surprise, before Lee's hand is around his throat. The green beast shoves himself off the ground with his remaining arm, one leg useless, the other barely capable of being leveraged to throw his weight onto the old owl. Fukuro's blade flashes and Lee has enough in him to feel the pain of that razor-sharp edge slice across his chest. Too close. They're too close for such a long blade. The damage is minimal, he assures himself. The old man's back hits the ground, Lee straddling him. His hand reaches for a kunai. The old man does it faster. There's pain, and blood, the sound of sliced flesh, the warm wetness. Again. And again. He can feel his grip weakening, even with so many gates open. He hears Tenten screaming. Lee isn't like the old man, he doesn't stab frantically, he's not in a panic. His knife rises and falls once. The old man tries to stop it, but with the gates, Lee's strength overpowers his completely. The blade sinks into flesh and old Fukuro vomits a fountain of blood as his heart is pierced. Lee looks straight into his eyes. There's shock, then realization, then, the old man smiles. Looking at Lee in a way that's almost fond before the light of his eyes flickers dark. Lee rolls off him, and has enough in him to see Tenten as she runs closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't cry," he wants to say. "You're safe now. Don't cry." Hinata could see, Sasori was getting desperate. And desperate men are dangerous men. No longer was Sasori satisfied with merely using puppets, he'd extended his control via masterful chakra strings to anything and everything that could still be used as a weapon. Discarded knives, saban, shuriken, jagged pieces of shattered puppets, shrapnel, stone and wood. Everything. He was in the center of a storm of whirling debris, and though he could not see her within the shroud of artificial darkness that followed her, once she made a move, he would know where she was. She could see her target. The beating heart within his puppet body, pulsing and writhing in its hollow shell of a body. She could win. She could kill him. She just had to get past a few thousand blades to do it. She gripped her umbu sword tight, drawing another, longer than average kunai from a special holster. Then she ran, instantly, as her body brushed against one of the whirling chakra string. Sasori's entire arsenal converged, rushing towards her from multiple angles. She angled herself, leaping between tree trunks, down to the forest floor to remove a whole dimension of attack angles as she expertly avoided the storm of steel. When she struck the ground, she had a moment's reprieve as he struggled to find her again, but only a moment, and the closer she drew to him, the more clear his image of her location would be. Her hand whipped out, weapon at the ready, and the clang of steel on steel was loud as her weapon battered aside his projectile, and her chakra severed the string, holding it aloft in a single, smooth motion. Again and again the sound came, again and again she cut and battered aside his instruments. She dug in her heels, refusing to be driven back, even as she noticed the pain quickly beginning to lance up her arms. Chakra strings didn't have to worry about the limitations of muscles. His control dictated all the strength he could put into launching these blades. And his control was likely one of the best in the world. She felt like she was battering aside warhammers when he threw kunai, great swords when he launched shuriken. Her sword screamed, her kunai cracked. He had the strength, he had the control, but he had no patience. His tactics here were the same as those of his puppets. Overwhelmed with numbers. So he threw all he had at her, everything he could. When the storm abated, when the nearest of his arsenal ran dry and he had to reposition all the others to bring them to bear as he divided his focus on collecting the weapons she'd severed from him, that's when she ran. He saw her intent, and the last of his puppet vanguard was ready to intercept, moving to physically shield him if needs be as he put all his effort into hurtling more and more weapons her way. Hinata moved so fast her vision began to blur at the edges, so fast her legs could barely keep up, nearly pitching her forward. She ducked and weaved, moving between the weapons and hurled projectiles with all the skill she had as she tried not to slow. To slow was to die. The first of Sasori's remaining puppets was there, rushing with weapons drawn, scything and slicing, and it was almost child's play to dart past him, then another and a third. The fourth was a massive thing, too large to get around. Her sword and kunai smashed into it, burying themselves up to the hilt as her chakra burst through it, shattering its connection completely as it went slack in her arms. She slowed. She stopped. Instantly the puppet army surrounded her, some leaping into the air, hidden compartments for more weapons spitting out poison and metal and fire and death. Hinata let go of her swords and made a single cross-shaped seal. 4 shadow clones appeared around her. As one, they spun in place. Kaiten, the whirling storm of chakra battered aside the weapons, the flames and the attack, kicking up dirt and dust in the darkness with a deafening roar of rolling thunder and sundered earth. It blinded him, just for a moment. When he realized where she was, she saw his wooden face snap upwards, high into the air as she fell back to the earth, his puppet with her blades buried in it underneath her. The attack that came was desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. Weapons, explosions crashed into the shield that was her stolen puppet, ripping it to pieces even as it shielded her. Its body jerked, spasmed, and heaved like a dying beast under her. Still she held on, clutching her blades tight as she fell towards her enemy. She saw them before she felt them. Saban that slipped through, hidden in the wash of colors and fire and chaos. They pierced her arm, her legs. He didn't have the precision in his desperation to disable her limbs. It didn't matter. No doubt they were poisoned. It wouldn't matter for him either. He was dead now. The puppet came apart under her feet, and she pulled free, her blades tearing the last remnant of it to splinters as she fell. Her mouth opened, and the damaged scream she released was one of defiance, as she drew her blade back. He moved to escape. 2 hands burst free from the earth, holding him in place. She had enough time to see the naked panic on his face before her body hit the ground like a meteor, her legs absorbing the impact with a crash as her sword sliced his body and heart clean in 2, shoulder to hip. There was no blood. How could there be? The wooden dead face did not act like a human, but rather, fittingly, like a puppet with its strings cut. It fell to the forest floor and lay there, utterly still. Her breathing was harsh. Her heart was pounding thunder and fire through her veins, and when she released the enveloping darkness around her, she realized quickly she did not have the strength to stand. Hinata! That's Sasuke's voice. When did he get here? When had she shut off her Byakugam? Her body pitched forward, she hit the earth realizing she couldn't breathe. They will come after you too. Kuratsuchi hisses, nearly crawling towards her sword to grasp it with her sole functioning hand, then brandishing it in a defense that seems pathetically small in the face of the monstrous Jinchuriki. It was you. It's not a question. He knows exactly what she's referring to, it seems. It was, he says simply, beginning to march forward again as she struggles to her feet. His arm fully healed and hers, not so much. Why? She demands, shambling back, keeping her distance. Why wasn't the dog loyal? She could see his sneer, even behind his mask. Why did it turn and bite? He stalks forward, the grinding steel of his armor echoing like rolling thunder through the clearing. Even a broken beast will not let itself be killed. And your fucking grandfather never broke me. When he attacks, now she can't even defend. His armored fist bats away her blade, and it's all she can do to dance away from the blow that would have cracked open her skull, retreating back into the tree line. We don't live like men. You treat us like chained hounds. Muzzled and imprisoned to be brought out when you need someone to fight your battles for you. Discarded once we're no longer useful. He chased her, physically tearing through the forest in a combination of fury and overpowering strength, years of this pent-up emotion finally boiling over now that the tight coil of control was released and allowed to be given voice. She can't make hand seals. Her only defense is the sword, channeling fire into the blade to ward him off. The light dances across the red of his armor, long shadows snaking over the lines of his face and eyes. He truly looks like a monster. It's not pain that makes her grit her teeth now, it's anger. A simmering, seething thing bubbling to the surface, burning a path under her ribs. It's because of you. All of this. This whole fucking war is because of you. His deep-set eyes stare at her. I was a weapon. That was my lot in life. I could accept that. But I will not accept being expendable. Being discarded. And the simmering rage finally boils over. Her rage chokes her. It's a struggle to breathe, a struggle to even get the words out in a way that makes sense, and not just scream until her throat bleeds and her voice fails. But she does. You think you're fucking special? She doesn't recognize her voice. Something low and hissing. The pain of her arm, the burn of the poison eating at her insides is a distant memory in the face of the blood boiling inside her veins now. You think you have some kind of monopoly on suffering? On being discarded? The blade crackles in her arm, flaring bright as her chakra surges and scratches beneath the surface of her skin. She laughs. There's no humor in it, no mirth. It's a cruel sound, hateful, spiteful, when she opens her mouth again. You're wrong, he did break you. A broken, sad little thing who wants to bring down everyone else so he feels safe in the cruel, cruel world again. He goes still. Rigid. She sneers. You're fucking pathetic. Her hand hurts. And she realizes the grip on her sword is white-knuckled. She holds it ready, staring down this thing that had torn her whole world to pieces. She is going to kill him. It'll likely be the very last thing she ever does. But she will. Kill. Him. Then there's a sound, something loud, crashing trees and shattered wood, and suddenly she has to leap away as three massive, monstrous reptiles tear through the trees like rampaging bulls, each the size of a multi-story house. Kuratsuchi has to twist in midair, using the sword in her hand as a crude pick to snag herself on the trunk of a tree to avoid the massive whirling Fuma shuriken that would have bisected her in midair. She follows the weapon as it arcs and turns, twisting back around to land easily in the hands of Ryoko. The silver-haired kunoichi has a snarl on her lips, gray eyes shining like daggers as she stalks forward with unbridled hate at the IWA princess, her weapon spinning in her hand as it bled off the momentum. Round 2, bitch. Chapter 87. The Reikage sat in the makeshift canvas chair, leaning his left elbow over his knee, right arm held aloft by a medic examining him, the green glow of healing chakra knitting together the litany of small cuts and scrapes. The worst of it was being physically stitched by another medic, the two working in tandem around him. The pain was coming now, the rush of adrenaline and battle frenzy having long since faded. It was manageable, but it was there, would likely be worse come the morning. Same with Hataki, no doubt. All around him, men were moving. Some were escorting the wounded, some patrolling, some setting up the watch schedule, some building what would be their camp for the night. All were on guard, still resting just beyond the shadow of Konoha. The pillars of smoke were still visible, that's how close they were. Closed his eyes, breathing deep, smelling pine, wood, wet leaves, earth, blood and metal too. Status on our objectives? He called. His Umbu commander, the new one, Hano, stepped forward. Damage to Konohagakure's internal infrastructure and logistical support capabilities are estimated to be extremely high. Their casualties as well. The scroll of secrets of the Night Aim has been taken, along with many records and secrets from the various clans whose compounds we raided. With any luck, we may be able to replicate some of their clan techniques with time, at the very least, counter Tem. Another man, this one a Jounin, spoke next. We've captured several Hyuga clan members, 4 from the branch house, but at least 2 from the main house. They have no caged bird seal. Their age? I asked, eyes never opening, his body barely moving from his hunched position. Older, unfortunately. Mid-40s and early 60s both. They may not be ideal for procreation naturally, but we have options, more than we did before. We have several Uchiha as well. Members of their police force that tried to stop us. Are any of them related to Uchiha Itachi? Direct family? He asked, because he had to know that. No, Reikage Dano. I grunted. Hano cleared his throat. The primary objective, however, the capture of the young fire lady, Magajiro Sasami, eluded us. And I failed to kill Hataki. He snarled, feeling his men stiffen around him. This isn't a failure, Reikage-sama. Hano tried to reassure him. Isn't it? A uttered quietly. Remind me. How many did we lose? Not many, sir. One of his Chunin commanders answered. Casualties were numbers suggest we've lost about 1/6 of our strength. That's including both dead and wounded. I snorted. 1/6. Yujito was more than just 1/6. And there it was. If not for that, the day could have been called an unmitigated success. Even without Sasami, without Hataki, escaping with so many of Konoha's techniques, so many of their clan techniques, and so many prisoners they could use to breed their own derivative bloodlines in the coming years, the crippling damage they'd leveled into the internal organs of the beast that was Konohagakure, they'd won. Without a single doubt. They won. But of course, Konoha had to take something, didn't they? Some small scrap of victory they had no right to have. Yujito, dead. Her body was left behind. His fault. His order. His responsibility. She was one of his, and he'd left her behind. Unacceptable. Reikage-sama dash. Another advisor spoke. We've been unable to determine how many Sunanin have come to reinforce Konoha, and we're receiving reports from the southern scouts of additional movements. From Kiri, sir. We can't be sure of their intentions. We have much of what we came for and have likely done enough damage for IWA to capitalize on. We must retreat back across the border before they can organize a dash. We're not leaving. A snarled, his face twisting, tightening, a rictus of rage carving deep harsh lines across his features. I will not leave Yujito here. And my lord, the man stammered and I saw it was an older Jounin. The man was bowing at the waist. We may have the numbers to overpower what's left of Konoha and their sooner reinforcements, but we've lost the element of surprise and will be stretched thin launching an assault and guarding the prisoners at the same time. They can all turn on us and dash, then we negotiate. On paper. He knew what he was ordering. What he was doing. It's the wrong call. He knows it. Any other ninja. Any other one, even himself, this was not an option. But this was not any other ninja. This was Yujito and B. He'd sworn to never let them leave the village. That they would never come to harm while he was in charge. She insisted. Determined. Demanding. Loyal. His fault. His responsibility. His men looked aghast, surprised and dismayed. He couldn't look them in the eye. Couldn't blame them even as they protested his orders, and that too was unacceptable. You don't understand, gentlemen. The Reikage's voice rolled like thunder regardless. Talk, fight, burn it to the ground or rebuild it right back up, whatever it takes. I am not leaving one of our own there to be dissected and pulled apart. Everything she has and was turned against us. Follow my orders or get out of my sight. Sir. She's not worth this. She's just a dash. The man stopped, and they could only imagine the look in the pits that were his own eyes as he saw his own image reflected in the suddenly fearful gaze of his subordinate. There was a threat in his voice now, or perhaps a promise. if you're finished. The man swallowed thickly, nodding as he bowed again. I remained seated for a short time, pulling his arm free of the fussing medic before he stood. When he spoke, it was in a voice that invited no argument. She is our Jinchuriki. And we do not reward loyal service in Kumo with callous indifference. She will be returned to us, and I don't care if we have to fight all of fucking Suna or what's left of Konoha to do it. They agreed, and he didn't care if they meant it. The Reikage turned and walked away to where the men had just finished setting up what would be his tent. The silos? Burned, came the succinct answer. The silk farms as well. There were not many Inuzuka clansmen in the village, but those that were, their kennels were targeted first. Many of the dogs were burned in their cages before they could even muster. Kakashi sighed, rubbing at his forehead with his still functioning arm. He was sitting, inasmuch as he was allowed to sit. The preliminary prognosis said he'd likely lose the foot unless Tsunade returned. They could numb the pain, stop infection and inflammation from spreading. But the bones of his foot had been cracked and then subsequently ground against each other until it was a mess of tiny splinters. Surgery, extensive surgery, or amputation were the only options. But that, frankly, was a distant concern. The village itself had fared far worse. His fire attack had stymied the rush of Kumo Nin, giving his men time to secure the most valuable assets. Troop deployments, campaign plans, the location of their Hunter Nin and their S-class assets, Naruto, Itachi and such. The majority of the clan heads and governing political body of the village and higher administrative logistics had been saved. The most classified techniques as well. But everything else, the damage had only just started to be catalogued, and it was already a disaster. Kumo hadn't just been targeting the most valuable targets, such as himself, Sasami, and information they could use to decimate their active field forces. They'd been targeting clans. Kumo's desire for strong bloodlines was well known, and beyond giving what amounted to an obscenely last-minute warning to those same clans, there wasn't much that could have been done to stop them. The strong were out fighting. Those left behind, the young, the old and sickly. They were not useful for combat, but as potential raw material to abscond with, or potentially create wholly new bloodlines in Kumo. Dangerous. Catastrophic event. He hadn't had the numbers to evacuate them, and even if he had, he wasn't sure there would have been enough time. That wasn't to mention the damage and his ninja had inflicted on the clans themselves. The Aburame silk farms were destroyed. The kennels of the Inuzuka along with their fur processing had been destroyed. The Uchiha libraries, all of their collected knowledge of techniques gathered from all corners of the world and all their knowledge on the Sharingan, destroyed. Members of the Hyuga main branch missing. The only ones that had been spared were the Akimichi, the Nara and the Yamanaka, and mainly because those clans consisted of single-family homes. More than that, the hospital was heavily damaged in his fight with shops ransacked, homes collapsed, roads torn apart. Akane and her battle with the Nibi had nearly burned down a fifth of the village by themselves. The monetary costs alone would stretch into the millions on a treasury already stretched to the absolute breaking point. Once word reached the warriors at the front lines, and it would reach them, they would return. Many of them, if not all of them. Especially the Hyuga, thinning their forces even further. The only thing, the barest sliver of a positive, was who exactly they had taken in response. Status of the bijou? Orochimaru-sama is not here, the head Umbu said quickly. But his notes on sealing the bijou have helped those with some expertise. It has been sealed into a scroll. It's holding, for now. Though many believe the monster is exhausted from its battle. Once it regains its strength, well. And the host? Her body is being examined. Soon our medics will begin their more extensive inquiries in hopes of discovering any secrets she held. Belay that for now, he said calmly. Sir? Kakashi eyed the man lazily. Is still holding beyond the walls. What do you believe he's waiting for? The Umbu shifted. You believe he'll ask for her return? Demand more like. Kakashi explained. A bijou is a boon, but for now we have no host, and we won't have one for years yet. If we can return her and it both for some of what we lost, well, we might call things net even at best, rather than the crushing defeat this was. He took a breath, closing his eye as the headache throbbed. Where is the Kazekage? He has been. The man paused. Patrolling? He's walking the districts our fire attacks burned down, those closest to the Kumo camp. I would see him. The Hokage sighed. The Umbu offered a bow, turning to leave. Before he crossed the door, he called. Ask him? Politely, if you please. Another nod, and soon the door to his makeshift hospital room closed behind him. "I'm sorry! I'm so sorry! Stop apologizing!" The words came out harsher than she intended, but after almost 6 hours of incessant apologies, she got the message. "Sorry." Hanabi tried not to snarl as Akane winced. "The burns hurt." Of course they did, they were burns. She couldn't activate her Byakugan. The burning air had damaged her eyes. If she used it, she might very well make the damage irreparable. So she couldn't see herself as she normally would, and it felt stupid to ask for a mirror when so many others were injured and none of them were yet out of danger. She could feel it across her body as she squirmed on the medical cot. Her face, scalp, under her eyes, neck, shoulders, fingers, legs, everywhere. Akane had, by merely standing next to her, burned almost the whole of her flesh to some degree or another. Her skin was red, blistering. She hoped there wouldn't be scarring, or at least not much, and if there was, then let it be in places she could hide under clothes easily. Akane sniffled, and Hanabi opened a glassy orb to look at her. She looked miserable. Red tear tracks lined her cheeks, and Hanabi didn't have a doubt she was every bit as repentant as she professed and looked. The Hyuga princess wished she was better at this. That she could tell her it was all right, in more ways than she had, with just words. But she wasn't, so she settled on something else. On the other side of the street, beneath the canopy of a building's awning, along the other array of hastily put together medical cots housing the injured in the shadow of the shattered hospital, Hanabi could just spy Sasami, sitting by someone's bedside. Yuga, though, she guessed. She couldn't see the woman clearly from this angle, but who else would she be next to? "You think she's all right?" Akane turned her head, following her gaze. Another sniffle came out of her, wiping at her eyes with the base of her palm as she wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I dunno, haven't talked to her yet. I was worried about you. HN. You should. She probably needs a friend right now." Akane nodded, but still made no move to leave. The Hyuga girl breathed, deep and slow, feeling her chest expand with a pleasant stretch. "I should have seen it. I knew something wasn't right." Akane blinked. "Sasami," she explained. "I knew there was more to the situation. I thought she was a noble of some kind, perhaps a bastard from a mistress someone was keeping quiet and hidden." She snorted, to herself mostly. "The Fire Lady." "I didn't know either," Akane admitted. "I know," the pale girl said. "You can never keep a secret." At that, the redhead suddenly looked indignant. "What? Since when?" Hanabi's answering stare was flat and deadpan. Akane's cheeks puffed out. "You never knew I was a Jinchuriki! You lit up the village like a bonfire, secrets out. You don't know what Bija, though. The monkey. You know. The one who's famous for burning down half a continent." Akane's mouth opened, then it closed, and she stared mulishly at the bedridden heiress. Hanabi shrugged. "Don't glare at me because you have all the subtlety of a rampaging bull." She jerked her head. "Now stop stalling and go. Even if she wasn't the most powerful political figure that you can easily ingratiate yourself with, I figure you'd still be the kind to go help in this situation." Akane looked between the two of them. "But you're a big girl," she interrupted. "Now get up and go." The door opened. Kakashi's eyes swiveled up, away from the latest report regarding the damage suffered to the tower. "Kaza Kagedano." He nodded. Not that the gesture meant much. Sabaku no Gara looked much the same as when Kakashi last saw him, if not taller and older. His thin, lanky frame was still present, dressed in white and black, and blindfolded. The wolf leaned back in his seat. "I was under the impression your seal had been improved," he said by way of asking. To answer, the Kazekage reached up, pulling off the blindfold to reveal seafoam green eyes. "It has," he said softly before looking at the blindfold. "I've spent most of my life with this on. It's strange to go without it." As good an explanation as any. "As strange to arrive with such a thin escort?" The younger man looked at him blandly. "There wasn't enough time to wait for them." "And how did you know exactly?" he asked, shifting in his seat. "To arrive so quickly. Konoha is not the only one with spies," he said. "Kumo is on the opposite end of the continent from you. You would have needed advance warning, even with your ability to fly. And I received it," he drawled. "From Kiri." Kiri, if he were being truthful, Kakashi found it somewhat easier to believe. Kiri wanted trade. Kumo was one of the primary obstacles to that trade. Even so, Why would they tell you and not us directly? The Kazekage shrugged. Perhaps an intercepted message. A lie, definitely. But not one he could disprove, and not one he had the luxury to push right now. If it came to another battle, without the Kazekage's aid, more specifically without a second Jinchuriki to Kumo's none at the moment, they didn't have a prayer of driving them back. He was in no condition to fight, much less drive off A again, which would leave Akane to do the fighting. Could she win? Possible. But A had fought Jinchuriki before and won. The Kazekage had come to help them. And so right now, regardless of how he acquired his information, Kakashi needed to accept that help. Even so, not many would risk rushing to fight an elite attack force, alone. While I'm grateful, why risk it? What do you hope to gain? Gaara turned his eyes away. I owe Uzumaki, he said. I would not see his home destroyed if I could help. Some in Kiri feel the same. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. That's it. His incredulity was practically laid bare just in the tone of his voice. The younger man shrugged, closing his eyes. I doubt someone such as yourself, in your position, he amended, would have the luxury of believing that reason. But it is my reason. And it's why I stay now, despite the fact that my own guards are still more than a day's hard march away and Kumo's army lingers. What was visible of Kakashi's face was etched from stone, and suddenly his reprimands towards Naruto for his overly friendly treatment of the Kazekage and open help with the man's seal returned to his mind, almost taunting him. He doubted the man was being entirely truthful. It couldn't be, but if it was, the irony, by far, was not lost on him. Before he could speak, Gaara turned, walking towards one of the room's windows as he stared out into the damaged visage of the village. Is it true you've killed the Bijou and captured their Jinchuriki? The Hokage stifled a sigh, wondering if it was his men or Gaara's skill that had let the information slip. Yes, we did, he affirmed. I imagine that's why he's remained, the youth observed. That was my thinking as well. A pause, and Kakashi weighed the pros and cons of speaking his mind before he decided the pros outweigh the cons, at least while Suna still acted in common cause with them. I imagine he'll bargain for her. You plan to leverage that, the Kazekage observed. A bijou is not something easily lost or recovered from once it has been lost. Then again, the same goes with bloodlines. Yet more information slipping the net. Suna now knew of the compromised state of their clan integrity. And if Suna knew, soon Kiri and IWA would know. Kumo may have kept it under wraps for a time, at least until they could consolidate their research and try to forge new offshoot clans in their village. The other powers had no such compunction. He hasn't acquired as much value as he believes. He tried to hedge. If that were the case, you wouldn't be thinking of bargaining at all. Damn, the boy, for all his youth, was shrewd. He should have expected as much, perhaps. Gaara didn't move, remaining by the window with his arms crossed. He knows his position here is untenable. Tomorrow he would still be secure, but after that my men will arrive, and by then you would have assessed the damage to send out runners to go and summon back your nearest battle groups. When they arrive, his small force can easily be surrounded and cut off. If he's called more men, he risks overcommitting himself here. One bijou is not worth losing a significant percentage of his battle strength to secure. The boy seemed like he was thinking aloud, more to himself than Kakashi as he, step by step, deduced what the right strategy should be. It was a little impressive that he was doing it so quickly. But then again, he hadn't needed to think on this with a mountain of casualty reports being shoved in his face every 10 minutes since the battle ended. Your Umbu are likely hard at work making more traps and kill zones through the village to repel any counterattack. My presence alone would make attacking in a surprise night raid difficult. No, he'll talk. And he'll talk tomorrow, first light. You have it all figured out then. Kakashi chuckled. And what would you do then? Were you in my shoes? Gaara's eyes cleared, the pale green turning to him before turning away again. You will have only one option. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Oh? The Kazekage didn't elaborate. How are you doing there, kid? When Sasami turns, she finds Akane to be the one standing behind her. She stares up through eyes that hurt and a throat that feels like there's a giant fist stuffed inside of it, sitting beside Yugo's cot as she lays here at the side of a building, waiting for the medics to clear more room wherever they can find it. Yugo's hand is limp in Sasami's grip, cold, and the only thing that tells the young lady that she's still breathing is the light fogging of her oxygen mask. There are red blotches on the bandages around the ruin of her midsection, scratches on her face, a sallowness to her skin. Yugugo looks half a corpse already, and every slight pause in her breathing has Sasame's heart stopping in a deep, abject horror that she might not start again. This was a nightmare. A horrible, dreadful nightmare that she just couldn't wake up from. She looks down to the floor, and she can't see Akane through the shroud of her own dark hair spilling down around her shoulders. Hey! She feels the older girl place a hand on her shoulder, squeezing there tightly. She's gonna be okay, Sasami-chan. She's one of the best. She's gonna be okay. Sasami stares at Yugugo's hand clasped in hers and says nothing. She stares and stares, feeling a hand that's too cold, fingers with no strength, listening to that wretched, horrid rasp that passed for breathing. I can't do anything. She feels Akane shift behind her, and all at once she whirls on the girl. This one, who had come to their home so much, helped Yugugo run her errands, interrupted her from her studies and always smiled, who looked at her now with sad and lost eyes. And Sasami feels her tears come, burning across her eyes and down her cheeks. Nobles don't cry. Princesses don't cry. She tries to swallow them, they won't stop. They burn at her eyes, scald her cheeks as they trail down, and her features twist into something she can barely recognize in its feel. Something furious and angry and sad and forlorn and confused and frustrated, everything at once. She can't think. She can only feel, and she's feeling too much to feel anything at the same time. I'm the Lady of Fire! She shouts, glaring at the girl that is the living embodiment of fire standing in front of her. I am the one who sits on the gold jade throne. I'm the one who can order armies, can command shinobi. I'm the one who's the most powerful ruler in the country. Right. Then why can't I do anything? She screams, and it's pure rage that makes her bring her hands up, and bring her fists down with all the strength she has, punching and pounding at Akane's stomach and thighs, fury and rage making water burn at her eyes. This girl who was everything she wasn't, everything she should be. Wild and strong. With parents and friends that were real, who had real power and real freedom. Why? Why? She screams, her eyes clenching shut as the tears burn. She feels pain in her throat, her voice tearing and hurt, and before she fully understands, Akane is kneeling down, wrapping her tightly in a hug that Sasami clings to with all the hurt and strength in her that turns the embrace into something desperate and grasping. She cries, and through the blur of her tears all she can see is the burning red of Akane's fiery hair. Kyofa considers herself a self-aware kunoichi, if nothing else. She knows her strengths, her weaknesses, her limitations. She is a strong kunoichi, a match for nearly any other. With Ryoko by her side, the bingo books warn that there is almost no target that can safely fight them when they're together. Almost, however, is the operative word. And Ryoko, strictly speaking, is not here. She's busy pursuing the IWA princess, and even if she had been, Jinchuriki are some of the few targets that would have a better than average chance of defeating the both of them together regardless. Especially this one. The Monster of Iwagakure is not a title that was given to Han, and for all the power of her lizard, hawk and spider summons, she knows that her beasts are enacting a delaying action at best. They don't have the power to outright destroy Han, and whittling him down will never be an option. If he ever becomes truly desperate, Naruto's Mokutan is not available to force the Bijou back into submission beneath the seal that imprisons it. So she delays, she coordinates, and sends wave after wave of her beasts to harry and harass, distract and confuse, while other, smaller beasts scour the forests in search of Naruto himself. Find him, extract him, and the mission is complete. They would pursue, there was no doubt about that. Naruto and his bloodline was too great a prize to not try and keep trying, even if just to eliminate it once and for all. But her summons can run faster than any ninja should they be pressed to do so. This is her plan, and as she feels yet another of her spider summons have its connection severed, returning to the summon realm with a screech of pain as Han tears through it, she can't help but gnaw the inside of her cheek in worry as still her other smaller beats are having no luck finding her teammate. Then, her senses flare, warning with a sharp spike of incoming danger, and it's all she can do before she lunges off of the tree she was perched on before a pillar of superheated steam descends on the place from above, the leaves wilting and the bark cracking as the cloud boils the surface area. She hears the monster through the eyes and ears of her summons. Found you. The steam cloud tons, like a smoky serpent, and Kyofu curses her carelessness, curses her stupidity before her hands come together, and she uses the lining of her gloves to cut her thumbs again, lines of blood being drawn. 2 clouds of smoke answer, and tough bronze-colored scales oil around her as the cloud washes over the beast, and a single beat of a great pair of wings disperses the cloud into wisps through the air. She's not out of danger. She feels her other summons approaching, pursuing, coming towards her. When Han lunges through the darkened gloom of the forest, Kyofa's lizard summon whips around her, fangs gleaming as it roars, a wash of acid spraying from its mouth right into Han. The burning droplets hissing as they chewed through his armor bring the acrid smell of burning metal and flesh. Han thrust his hand forward, the billowing cloud of steam she thought dispersed coalescing again to snare around her summon's jaw, and with the clenching of an iron-clad fist, slams the beast's jaws shut with a bone-rattling crack. Her beast barely has the time to snarl before Han's fist craters its skull, swiftly and violently severing her connection to it. It vanishes in a cloud of smoke, leaving her exposed. Han is still moving, still rushing through the air like an arrow, straight and true as he descends on her. Kyofa draws her tanto. It's all she has time to do, all she can think to do in her reflex. It's not even a flimsy defense. That same fist that shattered her summon's steel-hard skull smashes through the blade like it's porcelain, so violently that the shards of metal fly back into her. Many deflect off her armor, or catch in the protective silk of her robes, but more than a few slivers pierce her like shrapnel. A slice across her face carves open one cheek, and she's sure a shard has buried itself in her scalp as well. She doesn't give herself time to scream, doesn't let herself panic any more than she did. She moves, dodging, and Han's fist misses her sternum by a hair, but the follow-up elbow that cracks into her ribs is enough to shatter them even in his awkward angle. Her breath rushes out of her, and the shock to her body is such that she can't immediately breathe again, her lungs starting and stopping, like an engine that can't quite kick in as she stumbles back. Then the hawk she summoned for the steam cloud is there, screeching as it tries to tear at Han's eyes. The wide-brimmed, armored hat makes such impossible, and it's not long before Han's remaining hand snatches the hawk from the sky and breaks its body with the sound of dry twigs breaking and snapping. It's weakness, not intent, that makes her lose her footing, slipping from the tree limb to fall to the forest below. She tries to angle herself, control her fall, more importantly, control her landing. But lances of pain spear through her side, her breathing is sucking down fire through her throat, vertigo hits her, up becomes down, and when she grabs onto the side of a tree, the best she can manage is a controlled fall that wrenches something inside with a feeling of wet tearing. It hurts, her vision lurches and swings again before she loses her grip. She hits the ground, luckily, feet first, and a lifetime of conditioning help her absorb her landing even as she feels her knee wrench itself the wrong way. Her hold on her summons is tenuous, nearly broken, but it still holds. She screams in pain, hoping one of them is close enough to hear and help, even as she hears Han approaching from above. The first to reach her is one of her spiders, skittering and crawling, it screeches, mandibles clicking. She barely has the strength to grab onto the base of its leg to let herself be dragged away as the rest of her summons rush past her to intercept Han. She opens her eyes, sliding along the forest floor, and watches the beast of Iwa smash into her summons. A monster of armor against gnashing fangs and sharpened claws, poisoned spit and snaring webs. One by one, her connection to them is severed, like a thread being snipped by sharp scissors. They're gone, and Han is rushing after her again. With her remaining arm, she reaches down to her thigh, grabbing her satchel full of explosive tags and tears it off. She watches, forcing her eyes to stay open, to stay fixed on Han as he draws closer and closer. She's only got one shot at this. The spider keeps tugging her, pulling. But her weight is too much, and she doesn't have the energy to summon Gummo, the boss, or the time. He's going to reach them. She grips the bag tight, holding onto it with all her strength. Finally, when he's barely a dozen feet away, rushing to close the last bit of distance, she throws it. With a scream of pain, she spits fire behind it. She doesn't see his reaction, doesn't have time to. Her summon had been watching with its 8 eyes, and with a whirling movement, too fast for any normal spider, it jumps between them, shielding her from the blast even as its thunder rips through her body, sending waves of rolling pain through her guts and chest. The forest floor quakes and rumbles. The sound hits her harder than anything else, feeling like a physical blow, and she can't even hear her own scream through the blast and the subsequent ringing in her ears. But she has no reprieve, no moment. As quickly and violently as all the others, with the blast not even having subsided yet, her connection to her summon is severed, and she opens her eyes in time to see it vanish in a cloud of smoke, Han standing over her, armor scuffed and scorched but with nothing else to show she'd done more than scratch the finish. Her brain told her it was over. The part of her that was Orochimaru's student snarled and told her to quit bitching and find a solution. The solution, such as it was, came in the form of a punch. Not from her. It was unlikely she could have even mustered enough strength to deliver a spirited slap. The punch came from none other than Sakura. Kyofu had seen Sakura fight before, had been on the receiving end of more than her share of bruises. But Sakura did not hit with enough power to shatter the armor on Han's arm and send the armored monster skidding back, almost knocking him on his ass given the naked surprise in his eyes. Long pink hair fluttered, caught in the shockwave impact of her own strike as the girl straightened and Kyofu caught along her profile, the mess of scars that curled at the side of her cheek and eye. They were glowing. Like lines of fire running along the cracks of her skin, raw chakra leaking from the old wound. It's the feel of her own heartbeat that she becomes aware of first. It's a strange sensation to be aware of. To focus on. Her body so numb and so cold she can only feel that most peculiar sensation, the muscle thumping a steady, if sluggish beat in her chest. Then she feels static, pins and needles across her fingers and limbs, a churning nausea in her gut. The pain across her skull throbs and aches like a drill boring through the inside of her skull. It hurts. Soon she realizes everything hurts. She feels his hands then. Calloused, rough, and unyielding. They're not healer's hands. Not really. They're tools for killing, but oh how he's tried to turn them into healing hands. One is splayed across her back, holding her up off the ground, the heel of his palm to her upper back, fingers splayed behind her head to try and support it as his other is no doubt awash in green energy that's keeping her heart beating, struggling to save her. Hinata opens her eyes. Sasuke stares down at her. His eyes are dark, like black storm clouds, his face a rictus of concentration and effort. Sweat beads his forehead as he grits his teeth, and when she dares to look, black poison is oozing from the various cuts and gashes that litter her exposed pale skin. She is the Hokage's foremost apprentice, the next master of the Umbu Corp if her teacher had his way. She's studied poisons. And so she studied the healing arts that can counter her poisons. She knows what it takes to remove toxins from the blood. Knows how difficult and taxing it is. To even remove a single dosage could leave lesser healers drained and tired for hours. She very much doubts Sasori, in his desperation, had been stingy. Sasuke can't afford to exhaust himself, not for her sake. Her Byakugan is one of many. Naruto, the Mokutan, is not. She knows that. He knows it too. Her hand raises, and even that, in and of itself, takes effort, brings pain like needles of fire through her veins. She ignores it, pushes past it, forces her fingers into the familiar sign. It's all she can manage. Mission. His eyes dart to her hand and his face tightens. He ignores her, shoving more energy into her tenketsu. She can feel it, like a physical swell beneath her chest and ribs. Her hand loosens its sign, and she places it against his wrist, trying to push him away. She feels so damn weak. If he were here, he'd want me to save you, he hisses. She glares as best she can, but it's hardly more than a glower. Naruto's feelings are irrelevant. They aren't a justification. Mission. Critical. So are you. Sasuke bites out. Now with all due respect, Commander, stop talking, I need to concentrate. She spares him an unamused look at his stupid joke, and he shoots her a self-satisfied smirk. It vanishes in the next second as he grimaces and she realizes it's not an effort, it's pain. Her alarm raises and her eyes rake him over, searching for injury, but she finds nothing. When she brings her eyes to him again she stares. Her Byakugan isn't active. And yet she can see chakra hovering around Sasuke, like a corona, an aura. It's thin, barely a wisp of smoke, a heat distortion, but it's there. It's most visible around his eyes. He blinks, shaking his head, and the nebula recedes as he breathes shakily through his nose. Something I should tell you, he hisses. You need to know in case I don't remember. What's wrong? The question is calm, her mind is frantic, her insides twisting in worry. He looks down at her, peering through a glowing film of something just over his eyes, and smiles. It's a small thing, barely there. But he smiles so rarely she can't help but notice. I've had a crush on you for years, he says. Her brain stutters, dumbfounded. His eyes close in pain again, and his next words are hissed through his teeth. I didn't. That's a difference I know is real. His words are strange, but her worry overshadows her confusion as he shuts his eyes tightly, his healing faltering before reasserting itself with a firm, almost desperate need as he pours more energy through his hands that momentarily seem to crackle with lightning rather than soothing green. You need to know. He hisses through clenched teeth. And when this is done, you need to remind me. She doesn't understand, and her fear only increases before the green flares for a moment before fading away. Her injuries aren't healed, but she can breathe, her heart is still beating, the worst of the toxin is gone. Even so, she feels weak, vulnerable, and useless. Sasuke's face is a jagged series of hard lines, eyes closed in what is undeniably a physical pain as he leans over her. There's a sound distant, the sounds of a battle, people still fighting. He gets to his feet with a gasp, blinking through the haze. I'll be back soon, he assures, and when he looks at her, she doesn't fully recognize the one staring back. It's almost over, he says. The waters lap and churn at their feet, and to Orochimaru's eye it seems to dance, subtly to be sure, but the movement beneath his feet is altogether unnatural, like droplets of water sliding up blades of freshly cut grass, slipping over pebbles and finding ways to slip over the edges of little cracks and fissures in the stone. It's an eerie thing, causing a disquiet to burn at the back of his mind, and he knows like an instinct, an intuition in his bones that this one is responsible for it. He is a frail, emaciated thing, his lower torso fused with a bone-white, dead tree, the roots coiling around and through his legs, until flesh and bark become something indistinguishable beneath the dark silk covering over him. Conan lays at the roots, close enough for his arms to cradle her close with arms that seem more bone than flesh and sinew. His features are gaunt, sunken cheeks and hollowed eye sockets. But the eyes themselves, he's never seen the like. Lilac dark rings circling the pupil, all the way to a non-existent sclera. His eyes wander, just a bit, just enough, he has to because there, at the side of the tree, framed by tiny rivulets of cascading water, is a cairn. And on it is a broken-horned Hittite he would recognize anywhere, even through 100 lifetimes. His fist grips the hilt of Kusanagi tight, and it takes a true effort to rein in his temper, but rein it in he does. "Who are you?" he asks, and he's able to do so with a calm he doesn't quite feel. His voice low and level. Tsunade shifts beside him, walking to gain some distance, to start encircling this mystery for the fight they came here to finish. Ringed eyes stare at him, and when the answer comes, the man's lips do not move. The waters ripple and churn, and little droplets hiss out as the very air vibrates with power. "We are all that's left." His speech, if it could be called such, is slow, punctuated. Like the pouring of rain itself, falling in a torrent for sound but receding its intensity to enunciate words and sentences. The level of control this must take, just to speak. All that's left of what? It's Tsunade who asks. Lips curled into a sneer? He turns his eyes to her, and again the waters of the aqueduct and the rain itself answer. Of Jiraiya. He can't help but stiffen, feeling his spine straighten, a chill of something that was not quite fear and not quite rage, and yet wholly born of indignation burns low in his gut, and an angry snarl is on his lips before he can help himself. "You're lying." It's Tsunade who spits out the words, and the heat he feels is reflected in her voice. "No." The waters hiss/whisper, calming at their feet. "I understand my dear Conan's enmity towards you, but I do not share it." The man looks down at the blue-haired Kunoichi as she tries to move, to get up one more time even as she pants like a wounded animal. His hands hold her still, before he turns back to them. "I would have no desire to lie to you. My master, your friend, would not want it. And I've always tried to honor his memory as best I can." It's Tsunade who moves first, anger and pain clear on her face as she stalks forward, heedless of danger as her fist clenches. Before he can move, the waters rush, and suddenly, surrounding the tree like a shell, is a wall of water. It whirls and roars, and he has little doubt that, somehow, stuffed within that tiny frame no thicker than a meter, there's enough compressed pressure to crush pure stone, let alone human limbs and flesh. Tsunade backs up, but it's only for a moment. Her fist cocks back, and the punch she delivers straight into the wall is enough to shatter mountains. He sees the water burst out the other side like an explosion, before being caught and redirected by the same nin's incredible control. Like a school of swimming fish, it dances through the air before returning to its place in the defensive technique, the wall looking none the worse for wear as it calms. The raging torrent becomes a placid bubble, and the aim nin stares at them through those unnatural eyes. "Please! I do not wish for enmity between us. Listen to my tale, and my offer. If after such you still wish to fight, then we may do so and let the cycle continue as it always has." Your dear Konan dash, Orochimaru finds himself saying as he and Tsunade begin to circle the barrier, is the leader of Amigakure. An Amigakure which is currently the linchpin to a confederacy of many smaller villages allied against Konoha. He explains slowly. We came here to kill her, and now you I suppose are a package deal. Then you have nothing to lose by indulging me. Except letting you stall for time. Tsunade snarled. Do you believe, with all I've shown you, that I couldn't have summoned help long before you arrived if I wished to? I imagine the only one who knows this place exists is that woman sitting on your lap. He shot back, calling the bluff. The man's shoulders sagged. She has always been protective of me. When he brought his eyes back to them there was a steely resolve in them. I will protect her now as well, if you force me. He warned again, the waters hissing angrily at their feet, like a million tiny serpents. We have our mission, he says simply. So you do, and yet I would ask, one last time, for the sake of the one you called your friend, to hear me out. Is that such an impossible thing? Orochimaru felt his lip curl, the anger roiling in his gut, and he knew Tsunade at his back was little better. It was manipulation. Blatant. Textbook. He had seen Jiraiya die with his own eyes. And yet, he turned his eyes to the cairn, shield behind the water veil, and the broken-horned Hittite resting there. Why would that be here? Tell me something, he demanded, turning to the man. Tell me something only he would have ever known. You say you're his student. So. Confirm it. The demand was snarled, and the man held his silence for a long, interminable moment, and through the water, Orochimaru could spy the blood trailing down from Konan's wounds and into the soil, contrasting sharply against the bone-white wood. Finally, he turned to Tsunade. He did not attend your wedding. Orochimaru felt himself stiffen even as Tsunade snorted. He had a mission, that's hardly dash, no? He didn't. Those inscrutable eyes turned to Orochimaru. That's what you were told, dash, he says, staring pointedly at the Serpent Master. By the man who convinced him not to leave.